Forgot my lights. Ooh. Uh-huh. Yeah. I'm just gonna be reading a book, The Legend of the Swans. This is a continuation. I just wanna get better at reading out loud. But I'm gonna do a warm up first, a voice warm up. Let's go. Let's go.
Tragedies. Hello. Good morning to you. What do you like? What do you do? Hey, it's Hadar. Today I'm going to share with you the ideal morning pronunciation practice. You want to think of it as a physical workout or a yoga practice that you do in the morning to get energized for the day, but also to build muscle. And this is exactly the same thing, but in this case, we're talking about the articulation organs. You want to do that in the morning to set yourself up for pronunciation success, but also to build the muscles of your articulation organs like the tongue and the lips and the jaw. Now, I recommend doing it every single day so you're more in control of the sounds that don't exist in your native language, but it's also going to help you sound more clear in your native language as well. You can do it in the morning, but you can also do it before going into a meeting or before having an important speaking gig. Okay, let's get started. But before that, if you are new to my channel, then hi and welcome. And this is a place for you if you want to speak English with clarity, with confidence, and freedom. So be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notifications so you don't miss out on any valuable lesson. Let's begin with massaging your jaw. It's always good to become aware and kind of like relax all unnecessary tension. We're going to start with that and end with that. There is a muscle here at the jaw hinge that connects between the upper jaw and the lower jaw, and usually we hold a lot of tension there. So I want you to massage it and kind of like try to release all the tension and maybe hum. We're also warming up the voice, so you don't have the morning voice. And here, the cheeks, and again the jaw. Maybe move it around a little bit with your hands. Okay. A little more. Okay, good. Now we're going to warm up the tongue. Let's begin by sticking the tongue out, and we're going to move it to the right and then to the left. To the right. We're going to do this 10 times. Okay, so right, right, left. Okay, now we're going to stick the tongue out and bring it up and down. So stick it out. Keep doing it. I'm going to keep speaking again. Push it out as if the tongue wants to come out of your mouth. 2 more. Very good. Now let's stick it out and bring it back in really fast 10 times. As far as you can. Okay, good. Let's release tension and blow your lips out. Okay, good. In the next exercise, we are going to clean the teeth with your tongue. So you want to move your tongue around. Keep doing it. Now, this is a really good exercise, especially before a meeting, so you make sure that you don't have green stuff or poppy seeds stuck between your teeth. I got you covered. Keep your lips closed. Good. Relax your lips. Good. Now we're going to use the tongue to massage the inside of the cheek as you're resisting the tongue with your cheek muscles. So, take your tongue, the tip of the tongue, and push it against the inside of your left cheek while the cheek is actually resisting it. So you want to push against. You want your tongue to feel like it's fighting something as you're massaging it. And get to all the different places inside your mouth. And to the right. Good. And now let's do a trill to relax the tongue. For some of you, this is going to be really easy if you have the trilled R in your language. If you don't, you can just do another lip trill. And now we're going to do it while going up and down in pitch. Massage the jaw a bit more. Very, very good. You're starting to feel your mouth, to feel the tongue, which is good because we need the tongue to articulate the sounds. And to be able to do it clearly, we need to be in control of the tongue. Now we're going to warm up the lips. So push the lips forward as if you're pushing it for a kiss, an exaggerated one, and pull it to the sides. Forward. Now, try to keep the cheeks out of the way, right? You don't want to go like this. Okay, you don't want to get used to engaging your cheeks when pulling the lips. Sometimes we need that to articulate some of the sounds, like the E and the A, and we want to be able to control these muscles. So just the lips, the corners of the mouth, and forward. One more time. Okay, very good. Make sure you're not holding tension in your shoulders. If you do, just tell your shoulders to relax. Tell your face to relax. Okay, good. Now we're going to go into a few sounds. Let's start with the tip of the tongue consonants. Let's begin with the T sound. Ta 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 ta. Make sure it's just the tip of the tongue touching the upper palate. Ta 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 ta. Da 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 da. Na 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 na. La 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 la. Let's do it together. Ta 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 ta. Da 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 da. Make sure it's light. Na 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 na. La 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 la. Ta 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 ta. Da 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 da. Na 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 na. La 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 la. And now we're gonna move the tongue back a bit and switch between S and Z. Now we're going to move on to consonants created with the lips. We're going to start with a P sound where you bring the lips together and release air. P, 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 P. And then the voiced version of it. B, 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 B. And then we're going to go to the nasal version of it. M, 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 M. P, 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 P. B, 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 B. M, 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 M. Again. P, 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 P. B, 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 B. Let's add vowels to it. And we're going to use the consonant M. My. So we're going into an I diphthong. You want to drop your jaw and then raise the tongue for an E sound. My. And then we're going to go into may. Okay? Now we're going into the A as in day diphthong, starting with an E, shifting into an E. May. Then we're going to do a long O as in go. Mo. Good. The next diphthong is going to be moy. Oi as in toy. mamamoy, mamamoy, mamamoy. And finally, we're going to use the ow diphthong. Mamamau, mamamau, mamamau. Just like in mouse. Mamamau. So we're going to do all 5 of them, one after the other. Mamamai, mamamay, mamamo, mamamoy, mamamau. Let's do it again. Mamamai, mamamay, mamamo, mamamoy, mamamau. One last time. Mamamai, mamamay, mamamo, mamamoy, mamamau. Very good. Now we're going to move to the back of the mouth, pronouncing the k and g. From there, I want you to shift to the high E sound. G-g-gee. G-g-gee. So the tongue pulls back for the g, and then forward for the high E. G-g-gee. G-g-gee. And then k-k-key. K-k-key. Good. So let's do it a few times. G-g-gee. K-k-key. G-g-gee. K-k-key. And then from there, we're going to move on to the tense oo sound, a back open vowel sound. G-g-goo. G-g-goo. K-k-koo. K-k-koo. G-g-goo. K-k-koo. G-g-goo. K-k-koo. Make sure you push the lips forward for the oo sound. Let's do it 2 more times. G-g-goo. K-k-koo. G-g-goo. K-k-koo. Very good. And now I want you to yawn. Kind of like raise the soft palate by yawning. Good. And let's find the voice and bring the voice to the chest. Hello, hello, good morning. Hello, hello, good morning. So you want to bring your voice to the chest. Hello, hello, good morning to you. Hello, hello, good morning to you. And then let's bring the voice to the head. Hello, hello, good morning to you. Hello, hello, good morning to you. You want to feel the vibrations here? And maybe a little bit to your nose. Hello, hello, good morning to you. Hello, hello, good morning to you. Okay, let's move on to some tongue twisters. Let's start with my favorite, unique New York, unique New York, unique New York. Let's do it again. Unique, hi-oo, hi-e, unique New York, unique New York, unique New York. Let's say it again a little faster. Unique New York, unique New York, unique New York, unique New York. Now, as you're moving through the days, if you do it every single day, you'll see that it's a lot easier for you to say it faster. The next one is good blood, bad blood. Good blood, bad blood. The good has that back open as in book, cook, and look. And the blood has a cup sound. Good blood, good blood.
Good blood.
You can hear the difference. Bad blood. Here we have the as in cat forward front vowel. Bad blood. Good blood, 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 bad blood. The next one is tragedy, strategy. Tragedy, strategy.
Tragedy.
Strategy. Tragedy, strategy, 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 tragedy, strategy. Good. I used to confuse this one all of the time. Let's do some TH warm-ups. So let's start with just sticking the tongue out and pronouncing a voiced TH versus a voiceless TH. Now we're going to work on transitions. N to TH. L to TH. You can also use the voiceless TH. Very good. And now STH. Make sure you stick the tongue out. The tongue is not too tight against the teeth, so the air comes out. Let's do it a few more times. Very good. Relax your lips. Release air. And massage your jaw again. Good. Very good. Finally, let's do some chunks. What do you? 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 What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you like? What do you like? What do you like? What do you like? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say? Next one is going to go. Gonna 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 go. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. She's gonna go. She's gonna go. She's gonna go. She's gonna go. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go to the office. 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 Next one is could have. Could have. Coulda. 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 Coulda, 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 coulda. Notice that the D is really, really light. It sounds like a flap T, like a ra, like an R in Spanish. Ra, pero, coulda, coulda, coulda. I coulda, I coulda, I coulda, I coulda, I coulda, I coulda, I could have done that. I could have done that. I could have seen it. I could have seen it. I could have been there. I could have been there. I could have done it. I could have done it. I could have seen it. I could have seen it. I could have been there. I could have been there. Coulda, 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 coulda. Shoulda, 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 shoulda. Should have. Shoulda, 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 shoulda. Woulda, 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 woulda. Would have. Would have. Woulda, woulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Okay, that's it. To wrap it up, I want you to put your palm on your belly, one on your belly, one on your chest, and try to breathe into the hand that is on the belly. And breathe out. Close your eyes. Breathe in to your belly, not to your chest, and breathe out. And last time, and as you exhale, you can also release a sound. Breathe into your belly. Okay, that's it. As I said in the beginning, I recommend doing it every single day. And when you do, you will feel the improvement and how easier it is for you to articulate sounds in English and in your native language as well. Now, to make it fun and to hold each other accountable, every time you complete this exercise, write in the comments, done. So we know that you did it again today. Have a beautiful, beautiful day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.
Okay, I'm gonna get myself a reading music. Where can we go? Where can we go? I'm on chapter 2. Chapter 2. But you're not a bird like Oliver. You can't be his brother. Bertie's exclamation when Gina introduced Will to her at the flat was an echo of Dilly's remark. He had accompanied Gina to the door of the flat, much to her surprise because she had thought he would have left her outside the building. He had come with her, he said, because he had left his briefcase in the flat. I can assure you I'm his brother. Same parents, just a different combination of genes, said Will, jovially, his glance roving appreciatively over Bertie, tall and Juno-esque. in a long, clinging black evening gown with a deep plunge neckline, which left little to the imagination. "Where have you been all my life?" he added, provocatively. Bertie's wide, knowledgeable blue eyes twinkled back at him. "Right here, Will, waiting for you to turn up. I hope you'll stay for the party. Come into the kitchen and help me sort out the drinks while Gina goes and changes. It's as good a way as any I know of getting to know one another better." "Hmm? Lead the way, Bertie. I'd love to know you better," he replied with a grin, and Bertie chuckled delightedly as she tucked a long white arm through one of his. "Oh, William, you're just the boost this girl's morale was needing." They went off to the kitchenette together, apparently having forgotten Gina, who went on to her own room. The bed was still unmade, and Blue was curled up on the corner of the eider-down which trailed on the floor. He greeted her excitedly when she flopped down onto the bed. "Oh, Blue," she whispered to the furry, purring animal. "What am I going to do? I think Will Fox has forgotten that he offered me a job." She had hoped to bring up the subject of the job as cook at the spring camp during the drive back to Birmingham, but she had found it difficult to communicate with her companion, who had been silent and reserved, concentrating on driving in the pouring rain. His withdrawn manner came as a surprise because, during dinner with her parents, her youngest brother Michael and his colleague friend, Will, had been pleasant and talkative. But in the darkness of the little car, she had felt once again that he disapproved of her, even disliked her. His dislike had arisen, she guessed, from his observance of her behavior at the tea party. He had seen her at her worst, he thought, and now he wanted nothing more to do with her. She longed to tell him that she hadn't behaved badly deliberately, that she had only shrunk from the social occasion, in the same way she was shrinking from Bertie's party now, because she didn't want anyone to pity her. But she had found it completely impossible to communicate with him when he had ignored her. And now he and Bertie had met the chances of approaching him with fading fast. They were obviously attracted to one another on sight. No sooner looked than loved. Was that how it would be with him? Impatient with her thoughts, she pushed Blue to the floor and stood up. If she didn't go to the party, she wouldn't be able to rest because of the noise. Bertie's parties were always very gay and very noisy, which was why she and Oliver had always avoided them. Also, she had to make sure Will Fox did not monopolize Bertie too much. Robin Carlton, who had been taking Bertie out for some months, would be coming, and Gina was convinced he was in love with Bertie. Going to the wardrobe, she selected one of the evening dresses she had bought for a trousier. It was made of fine wool and was patterned in deep greens and blues. A pleat from the seam just under the high bust-line gave it a medieval effect. It had a simple low curved neckline and full three-quarter length sleeves. With her hair let down from its chignon and drawn back from her face to hang in rippling curls down her back, Gina looked elegant yet youthful as she entered the living room. She did not realize that the dress emphasized her softness, giving her a pampered look in the eyes of Will Fox, who surveyed her with a slight sneer curving his mouth. He was lounging on the settee with Bertie. One of his arms rested on the back of the seat behind his hostess, and his hand touched the top of Bertie's bare arm. Noting the intimacy with which he was already treating her friend, Gina determined to be as pleasant and as kind to Robin when he came. When Robin did arrive, he looked rather dumbfounded by the sight of Bertie on such good terms with a lively Will, and immediately Gina's determination increased. For the first time in her life, she exerted herself to hold a man's attention. Robin responded rather half-heartedly, but as the party became noisier and noisier, he seemed to grow more and more disheartened as Bertie ignored him. Finding in Will someone who could cap her on humorous remarks with outrageous witticisms, which set everyone roaring with laughter. Then, at one point, someone asked Will where he was staying for the night in Birmingham. He considered the question with apparent seriousness and, looking straight at Gina, said, I'm staying here. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping to move into Bertie's room. No one took his remark seriously except Gina herself and Robin, who muttered, I can't stand any more of this, and left the room. Hurrying after him, Gina tried to persuade him to stay, but he was too angry to listen and left the flat, banging the door behind him. If Bertie noticed his absence, she said nothing, and the party went on, although without Robin. Gina lost interest and eventually retired to her bedroom. There she made the bed and began to undress. What a day it had been! She felt as if a whirlwind had entered her life when Will Fox had entered her room. Nothing had been the same since then, and all her preconceptions about people had been upset. He had made her start questioning about herself, about Oliver, and now about Bertie. She had known Bertie since her days at the grammar school. They had spent holidays together. Yet what did she really know about her? She had always thought her kindly, if a little scatterbrained, but after this evening, she was beginning to wonder about Bertie's morals. Realizing the direction her thoughts were taking, Gina found her face burning. Was Will Fox really going to stay the night in the flat? There was only one way to find out. She must go and see if he had left with the others. The noise from the living room had died down now, although she could still hear the record player and, above it, people calling out good night, followed by the sound of the flat door closing. Opening the door of her room a crack, she listened. All was quiet, except for the sound of soft music. Gina stepped out into the passage and went along to the living room. She walked in and stopped dead. On the settee were two people intertwined in a close embrace. Bertie and the ex-army captain, of course. Her heart beating fast, Gina whirled and retreated along the passage to her room, closing the door. She leaned against it, trying to calm her agitation. What could she do? Nothing, really. Bertie and Will were adults, and what they did together was none of her business. Why then did she have this strange sense of disappointment? She had thought better of Bertie. As for Will Fox, well, there wasn't anything she would put past him. The rest of the night seemed interminable. She couldn't sleep. Every time she turned on the bedside lamp and stretched out her hand to the bottle of sleeping pills prescribed by the doctor, There flashed across her memory the image of Wolf's mouth twisted into a sneer, and she heard his voice, almost as if he were there in the room with her, asking her if they were the drugs she used to forget reality. Immediately, her hand withdrew from the container. She switched out the light and flung over on her other side to woo sleep once more. The trouble was her imagination was too vivid. She kept thinking of Bertie and Will as she Bertie and Will as she had last seen them kissing on the settee in the living room. It was strange that it should bother her. Over the past few months, Robin Carlton had stayed late with Bertie in the living room, and Gina hadn't given it a thought. Ruefully, she had to admit it was because Will Fox had been there tonight. He was unpredictable. She couldn't be sure what he was really like. She had changed her mind about him several times already. Dawn crept stealthily into the room, filling it with pearl gray light. Gina gave up trying to sleep and decided to go into the kitchen to make herself a cup of tea. It was only 6:30. That meant the day was going to be long, a wasteland without Oliver. Perhaps she would go home and spend the day with her parents, and maybe tomorrow she would visit her eldest brother Luke and his wife, and their new baby. Anything to fill in the empty hours. To her surprise, the living room was tidy, all the debris of the party having been swept away as if by a clean broom. Cushions had been plumped and ashtrays had been emptied. Everything had a shining look. The settee did not look as if anyone had slept on it, and immediately Gina's heart plummeted. Where was Will Fox? She went to the kitchen, and this time her heart leaped up. Someone was there before her, someone who was whistling a familiar tune, a folk song she had once heard with a slightly seductive lyric, something to do with lifting a woman's petticoat to buckle her shoe. Good morning, George. Will was pouring boiling water into the teapot. He was clean-shaven and was wearing a different shirt. He was alert and bright-eyed, and apart from a few telltale lines under his eyes, she would have thought he had slept a full 8 hours during the night. He made her feel more jaded than ever, and she resented him. Good morning, she replied coldly. So you did stay the night after all. I did, but it's time I was on my way north. I have dallied in the lush pastures of the innovating South long enough. Have you finished thinking yet? About what? She countered. My suggestion that you should come north with me. After last night, I'd have thought you'd have asked Bertie to go with you, she said, still cold. Meow, he retorted with a groan. Then, sobering, he added, I didn't mention it to her. She's a great girl, lots of fun to be with. She and I. He paused and gave her an enigmatic glance. Do you think she'd come if I asked her? He quoted with a touch of earnestness which was oddly disarming, giving her the impression that for once he was uncertain and needed encouragement. But Gina was not disposed to encourage him in that direction. But he was not to be given the chance to go north with him and cook at his adventure camp. There was Robin Carlton's to be considered. Besides, but he couldn't cook. No, I don't think she would, she replied firmly. You see, she likes her work here, and she's in line for promotion yet. For promotion soon. Actually, I had finished thinking, and I'd come to the conclusion that perhaps I could help you out on a purely voluntary basis until your partner's wife is able to tackle the work again. Would that be of any use to you? She asked, in the manner of someone conferring a great favor. He was busy pouring tea into the 3 cups, and he did not answer at once. When he had finished pouring, he glanced at her thoughtfully. Hmm, you're not exactly the sort of person I had in mind, he said slowly, but I am inclined to accept your magnanimous offer because I've always worked on the theory that one volunteer is better than several pressed men. Thanks, George. I'll be glad of your help. And now I must take this cup of tea to Bertie. I think I owe it to her. He didn't say why he owed the cup of tea to Bertie, but left the kitchen before Gina could remonstrate. She followed him into the passage just in time to see him go into Bertie's room and close the door behind him. A few seconds later, she heard them laughing together. She had the most uncomfortable feeling that the joke they were sharing was on her. Hands clenched by her sides, she returned to the kitchen to drink her tea and give Blue his morning milk. As she set the saucer on the floor for the kitten, the enormity of her recent impulsive decision to go north with Will Fox that day and stay in his wilderness to cook for 20 youths became more apparent. Whatever had she been thinking of? What had goaded her into offering to help him for nothing? She must be out of her mind. Going over the conversation, which had led up to her making her offer, she realized with a sense of astonishment at her own peculiar behavior that she had offered merely because she hadn't wanted him to ask Bertie. The telephone shrilled suddenly in the living room, almost tripping over her dressing gown. She rushed, she rushed to it to make sure she answered it before Will did. It would never do for him to answer it at this time of the morning. Robin answered her breathless greeting. He wanted to speak to Bertie. Gina told him to hang on, and glad to see that Will had gone back to the kitchen, she went into her friend's room. Bertie, looking curiously angelic in a white crochet bed jacket with full sleeves, was sitting up in bed. She greeted Gina with a smile and raised her teacup. Look what William the Conqueror brought me, she said. The Conqueror? Why do you call him that? Exclaimed Gina. Oh, he just strikes me as being the sort of man who sees and conquers, replied Bertie, airily. Bertie, did you. I mean, did he. Where did he sleep last night? Stammered Gina, but his eyes widened. On the settee in the living room, I suppose. That's where he said he'd sleep. Then, as understanding dawned on her, she exclaimed, You didn't really believe him when he said he was going to move in with me. Oh, honestly, Gina, how could you? Quite easily. The last I saw of you both, you were in a very convincing clinch, and he hardly left your side all evening. In fact, poor Robin was. Oh, heavens, I forgot. Robin is on the phone. He wants to speak to you urgently. Why didn't you tell me? Here, for goodness sake, take this cup and saucer. Oh, it worked. It worked. It must have worked. Oh, darling William the Conqueror, however can I thank you enough? Sang Bertie as she got out of bed and sped from the room, leaving a completely bewildered Gina holding the cup and saucer. Pulling herself together, Gina went along to the kitchen again where Will was eating his breakfast and reading the Saturday morning newspaper. Your tea is going cold. Better pour some more, he said practically. And eat as well. I don't stop for snacks when I'm driving. But I don't think I can be ready to leave today, said Gina. Why? What is there to do except pack a few clothes and your toothbrush? He asked. Take jeans and shirts and loads of sweaters, if you have any, and warm pajamas. We have plenty of droughts up north. You won't need an evening dress, much as I liked the one you wore last night. There aren't any bright lights where I live. Captain Fox, she began, but he raised his voice above hers and continued to issue orders. Let's see. It's now 7:15. We should be able to leave at 9. I'll make some sandwiches. Have you a thermos flask? Good. We can take coffee too. I can eat while I'm driving with you there to hand me the food. That means we can keep going and should reach Loch Lomond this evening. We can stay the night there with a relative of mine. Now, as soon as Bertie stops talking to Robin, how how do you know she's talking to him? Interrupted Gina, and he gave her an irritated, slightly scornful glance. Do you think she'd leave her bed in such a hurry to speak to anyone else? He countered. As I was saying, as soon as she gets off the phone, you telephone your parents and tell them where you're going. Then pack your bags while I bring the truck around. Anything else you have to do? Gina felt panic rising within her. Wildly, she looked for reasons to delay their departure. Yes, of course there is. Had just like to make it clear here and now that I'm not a subordinate soldier whom you have to brief before sending him on a mission, she said coldly. I know perfectly well what I have to do before I can leave here. I need more time. I can't give up half a flat just like that. She snapped her fingers. Someone will have to take over my share of it. And what about Blue, my kitten? What about Blue? He drawled, rather menacingly, she thought. I can't deserve him. I can't desert him. Oliver gave him to me. Won't Bertie look after him for you until you come back? I don't think he'd stay with her or anyone else, she replied, seeing a loophole through which she might escape. No cats, he returned tersely. No cat, no me, she retorted grandly. For a moment there was deadlock as they stared at each other. Then, with a careless shrug of his shoulders, Will said, all right, bring him. But don't blame me if he gets lost, or drowned, or is shot. Well, that's the cat sorted out. I don't think you'll have any serious trouble in getting rid of your share of the flat. Young Robin will be moving in soon. Young Robin, she repeated. You talk as if you were old enough to be his uncle. Well, that's how I feel. Sometimes. Like an uncle, giving the younger generation the benefit of my hard-won experience of life, he remarked, and bitterness carved lines beside his expressive mouth. But not Bertie's uncle, observed Gina with pseudo-sweetness. Uncles don't usually embrace their nieces passionately. His quick grin was shameless. I thought I heard you come into the living room. You can blame that little incident on my proximity all evening to a beautiful blonde. She went to my head and I got carried away by the part I was playing. He replied blandly, rising to his feet. If you have finished eating, I'll clear away while you you phone your parents. If you have any problems in explaining to them, let me talk to them. She had no problems. Her father seemed delighted by the idea and told her not to worry about the flat or any other business because he would look after that for her. It'll do you good to get away. Nothing like a change to help you forget, he said. She was about to say that she would never forget Oliver and didn't want to forget him when she realized that she had not thought of him since yesterday. She had been too busy. Oliver hadn't even been the cause of a sleepless night. His brother had taken over in that respect. Her mother was also enthusiastic about her decision to go north. 3 or 4 weeks should do the trick, she said comfortingly, and then you'll be ready to come back and face up to normal life again. Write to me as soon as you get there and let me know what's it like. Telephoning done, Gina went in to see Bertie again to tell her she was leaving that day. She found a friend in an ecstatic mood, trying to decide what to wear. Oh, Gina, I am so happy. Robin has asked Robin has asked me to marry him. He said he couldn't wait until he got here. See what a little competition does for a man, even if it was only pretense. You mean you and Will behaved as you did last night, deliberately, in order to make Robin jealous? Yeah. As soon as I met Will, I guessed he would be the sort of person who wouldn't mind playing up to my lead. He did it very well, don't you think? Laughed Bertie. Too well. I was the only spectator for the big love scene, remarked Gina, dryly. Robin had left long before that. Oh, that, said Bertie, and to Gina's astonishment, she blushed. Gina's astonishment, she blushed rosily. I suppose it wasn't really necessary, but somehow it happened so naturally, and it was nice. The expression on Bertie's face changed to one of grave seriousness. Gina, are you sure about going to this place where Will lives? It might be a bit rough. Not like living here, you know. I know. I'm going to prove to him that I'm not spoiled and pampered, and that I can work as hard as anyone. At the same time, I'll be helping his partner's wife. She'll probably be glad of the company of another woman. It isn't a permanent job. I volunteered to do it, and can leave when I'm ready. I'll probably be back here in time to be your bridesmaid. I hope so. I was going to ask you, but I didn't like to because it isn't long since you were going to be the bride, and I was going to be the bridesmaid, said Bertie. I wish it had all turned out differently for you, Gina. And I hope you won't, and I hope you won't let losing Oliver stop you falling in love with someone else. Yeah, I'll try not to. But at the moment, I feel as if I'll never fall in love again, sighed Gina, her eyes filling with tears. It's so painful when you lose the one you love. Kind of. Just waiting for that person to leave. Ooh. Mm. Excuse me. We got a long way to go. A long way to go. Mm, 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 mm. Man, oh man, oh man. Let's go. The journey to the wilds of Scotland was worse than a nightmare to Gina. Accustomed to travelling in comfort, she found the cab of the small truck which Will owned noisy and rowdy. The seat was hard, making it difficult for her to relax. Her companion's determination to reach Loch Lomond That day meant that he drove at a steady fast pace once they were on the northbound motorway. He did not bother to entertain her with small talk, and there was no radio. Lunch was taken somewhere between Manchester and Lancaster as they roared along at a steady 70 miles per hour. It was impossible at that speed to pour scalding hot coffee into a plastic cup without spilling it onto her light beige pants. It was almost impossible to drink the stuff because every time she raised the cup to her lips, the truck lurched quite unnecessarily, she thought, and she and the cup failed to make contact. The simple needs of nature seemed not to affect the army at all, and then, when Will did not condescend to stop, he did so on a windy, rain-swept stretch of road amongst the bleak fouls of Westmoreland. She had to climb over a dry stone wall, only to land in a swamp the other side in which she dropped blue so that the Persian complained bitterly. When she finally fought her way back across the road to the truck and its waiting whistling driver, she had to brave his derisive glance, which took in her disheveled hair, coffee-stained, rain-soaked pants, and muddy, bedraggled animal. "You might as well get used to living close to nature," he mocked, "because where we're going there's nothing else but moors and mountains and water." As they forged forward through the mist-laden fogs, Gina began to feel the effects of a sleepless night. She tried to doze, but there was nothing for her to rest her head against. It kept nodding forward. She would feel as if she were falling, and she would jerk it up again and peer blearily out of the rain-spotted windscreen, then doze off again. The jerking happened several times, making her feel thoroughly wretched. She wished she was at home, curled up on the Chesterfield at Green Willows, watching the Saturday afternoon sports program on the television, looking forward to afternoon tea as served by her mother, or, alternatively, shopping in Birmingham and then going on to the cinema or to the repertory theater to see a good play. You can try you can always try my shoulder if you like. Will's voice came as a shock, breaking through the cloud of sleeplessness which hovered around her. She glanced at the shoulder in question. It looked sturdy and stable. Having made his offer, he seemed unconcerned as to whether she tried it or not. Shifting a little closer to him, she leaned her head against the upper part of his arm. Her eyelids drooped, and in no time she was asleep. The sound of voices roused Gina. Opening her eyes, she blinked in a puzzled way, wondering where she was. Beneath her cheek, the tweed of Will's jacket was rough, yet comforting, and she was loath to sit up. Eventually, she became aware that they had stopped for petrol, and that the boy attending to the pump was staring through the window at her in an interested way, a cheeky, knowing smile curving his mouth. He had a long-jawed, freckled face, and from beneath his cap, tufts of sandy hair stuck out. Something about his face felt Scottish to her. "Where are we?" she muttered, sitting up and trying to tidy her hair with her hands. Leaning down, she picked up her handbag and brought out her compact. Snapping it open, she glanced at her face and hair, and nearly passed out with shock. One of her cheeks, the one which had been resting against the hospitable Harris tweed, was red, and the other was quite pale. Her hair was straggling down from its chignon, and her eyes looked slightly bloodshot. Her lipstick was non-existent. She looked literally as if she had been pulled through a hedge backwards. No wonder the boy was grinning. "Lockerbie," answered Will briefly, flexing his shoulder and arm as if they were stiff from having supported her. "In Scotland?" "Yeah." He turned away to pay the boy. Since they had stopped, perhaps there was a chance that he would let her go to the woman's room to clean up, if the petrol station had such a place. If not, perhaps they could go for a cup of tea at a cafe in the town. Hurriedly, she asked him as he stuffed his wallet back into his inside pocket. As if he hadn't heard her, he reached out to turn on the ignition and then the engine roared into life. Before realizing the brakes, he glanced at her critically. "Ah, you have a comb, haven't you?" he asked, and she nodded. "Well, use it," he barked. "And let's get this straight before we go any further. Where you're going, no one is going to worry if you don't look like the latest model out of a woman's magazine. Least of all shall I worry. Cleanliness and neatness is all that is required. You coming to work, not to stand around looking decorative." The truck lurched forward and turned out into the road. Gina had a confused impression of a narrow rain-washed street, lined with plain-fronted shops and houses, all huddled together as if for comfort. And then they were on a fairly new wide road, still heading north. On either side of the road, green fields looking dank and desolate under a grey sky, stretched away to gently curving hills. Beyond the hills, she could just see the bulk of higher hills, also grey like the sky. Here and there a row of dark pines marched up a hillside, and in the corners of fields bare deciduous trees spread forlorn, dripping branches. With an exaggerated sigh for the benefit of her companion, Jean peered once more at her reflection and struggled to comb her hair. It wasn't easy to do with one hand, so in the end she unpinned the chignon and tied the released long tresses with the chiffon scarf she had brought. Using a freshening pad, she cleaned off her old makeup and didn't apply any more. Then she sat back and looked out of the window. They seemed to be quite high up now, and the rain was more like mist swirling around them. Water sprayed up from the wheels of traffic passing in the opposite direction, flinging mud at the windscreen of the truck. Whatever happened to springtime? Thought Gina, as she looked out at the bleak scene. The hills had crowded closely above the road now, and she could see water cascading down the dark, glistening rock. She thought of the daffodils nodding their heads in the garden of the cottage at Shottery the previous day, and of the fresh tuffets of green sprinkling the hawthorn hedges in Warwickshire. Here there were no hedges and no daffodils, only the dark primeval, primeval, primeval walls running across the open land, and a few weirdly shaped pine trees. And the villages through which they passed had none of the warmth of mellow brick or golden stone, but were pale grey and secretive looking. From the rear of the truck came the plaintive cry of the cat, but Gina knew better than to ask the uncommunicative driver of the vehicle to stop. Nor did she wish to get out of the truck in this weather to duck behind a stone wall or cane, only to return to some derisive remark. So she sat silent, once again wondering what had possessed her to go north with him. The rest of the journey was miserable in the extreme, as she grew more and more cramped, and more hungry. Hamilton was a mass of factory chimneys and endless dark streets. Then they were on the outskirts of Glasgow. Then, in the city itself, beside a muddy, turbulent river, crossing a bridge amidst slow crawling traffic which made her companion curse vividly and fluently, with little concern for her gently reared ears. Once over the bridge, they turned left along a main thoroughfare where lights were glittering and the Saturday afternoon shoppers were still crowding the pavements. Then back to the river they went. It was charcoal grey now, under low, tumbled clouds. Gradually, the city was left behind. Ahead, Gina could see the dim outline of mountains beyond a wider stretch of water. Lights flashed, sometimes red and sometimes white. Something vague and shadowy, ablaze with light, floated on the water, and she realized it was a ship moving down the estuary. Soon they were passing through another town past an old castle, turning right up a hill into the darkness of the countryside again. Lights once more ahead, and they were in the town of Alexandria. There were people queuing up for a cinema, pubs opening their doors, a fish and chip shop where she could see people leaning on the counter waiting to be served. She could also she could almost smell the fish and chips, and her stomach gurgled suddenly, noisily. Not far now, murmured Will, comfortingly. The first time he had spoken since he had sworn on the bridge. She couldn't see him properly now. He was only a bulky shape in the dim light, a profile occasionally illuminated by the lights of a passing car. How did it do it? She wondered. How did it keep up the steady pace without stopping or flagging? It must be the army training, this ability to go on until the destination was reached. He would be terrible to work for, making the same demands on us that he made on himself, and 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 expecting her to respond. Whatever had possessed her to volunteer to come with him. One more town to go, smaller this time, and then the countryside again, and to the right a wide expanse of north, a wide expanse of nothing. No, not nothing. She could just make out the faint gleam of water. It must be a lake. Careful, Gina. They call them locks in the part of the world. In this part of the world. Could it be Loch Lomond at last? She asked her companion. His answer was brief. It was. They turned off the road onto another narrower one. A house, glowing with light, loomed out of the darkness. It was long and low. They stopped before a flight of shallow steps leading to a black painted door. The engine of the truck was stopped. The silence was blessed to Gina's ears, but it was split almost immediately by the harsh, im- impertinent, impotent, impertinent blare of the truck's horn as Will announced their arrival to whoever was in the house. The black door was swung open. Light poured out, showing up the slanting silvery rain. Two figures appeared, slim and adolescent, both with fluffy hair, both in pants. It was difficult to tell whether they were boys or girls, or one of each. One of them began to jump up and down with excitement, and when Will opened the door of the vehicle, the jumping figure turned and scampered back into the house. Gina could hear a shrill voice yelling, "Mom, it's Will! He's come after all!" The other figure skipped forward, not seeming to mind the rain. Will jumped down, picked whoever it was up in his arms, and whirled it around. There were squeals of delight. Gina supposed she had better get out and see to her poor, neglected kitten. She opened the door at her side and, moving rather stealthily, stepped down, splosh, into a puddle. The voice she could hear speaking to Will was that of a girl, and as she walked carefully round the back of the vehicle, she could see Will walking with the girl towards the house. As she put a foot on the lowest step, he turned and called out, "Come on, George! Don't be shy!" It seemed to Gina that he phrased everything he said to her deliberately, so as to annoy her. "I'm coming," she snapped back. "But I'd like to let, damn it, but I'd like to let Blue out first, if you don't mind." Saying something rude, which was almost inaudible, but not quite, about the cat, Will strode back to the truck, opened the canvas cover which protected the back of it, and reached in for Blue. The kitten wailed miserably as it found the rein on its fur, struggled a little, and jumped from Will's hands. It ran away into the wet darkness. "Blue!" wailed Gina, who was feeling damp, stuffed, and miserable herself, and had no desire to go searching an unknown garden for her pet. "Don't worry, I'll find him," said the girl in a lilting voice, and she disappeared into the gloom. A woman, tall and angular, appeared in the doorway and peered out into the driving rain. "It's good to see you again, Will. Who's with you? Who is it?" The well modulated English voice rose on a note of excitement and expectancy. Gina felt Will's hand grip her elbow as he urged her forward up the steps. "This is George, new chief cook and bottle washer for the camp," he announced firmly. "Oh!" There was some disappointment in the woman's voice. "I thought for a moment it was someone else." "Come in, then." She turned into the house, and they followed her into a wide hallway through an archway into a big, pleasant room. "It is Will, Drew, and his brother lad he calls George," the woman was saying. The man lounging in a deep armchair burst out laughing as he looked past her at Gina, and he was joined in his mirth by the other adolescent, who was a boy of about 14 years of age. The woman swung round, saw Gina, and exclaimed, "Oh, it isn't a boy at all!" Her blue eyes sparkling in her handsome big-featured face, which was somehow familiar. She rounded on Will. "You mischievous devil!" she rebuked him. "George, indeed. Now what sort of a name is that for a wisp of a girl?" She smiled kindly at Gina. "My name is Georgina," said Gina, encouraged by that smile. "Most of my friends call me Gina." "Which means you don't count Will amongst your friends, I should guess," replied the woman. "I'm Meg Maxwell, Will's aunt, and this is my husband Andrew and my son Gordy." The man, who was tall and slim and had iron gray hair, unfolded himself from his chair to greet Gina pleasantly and to shake hands with Will. "Water." "We've been waiting for you for 2 days now," he said in a soft, leading accent. "What kept you?" "The small business of finding someone to help Mage Anderson at the camp," replied Will briefly. "Who won today?" He settled down in a chair opposite to his host. Gordy immediately climbed onto the arm of the same chair to hang over him. "Wells took a licking, I'm glad to say," replied Andrew. Meg touched Gina on the arm. "Listen to them," she murmured. "Rugby union fans, both of them." just like Oliver, said Gina, who was still grappling with the fact that this woman was also Oliver's aunt, and she had never heard of her before. Oliver, queried Meg, then light dawned in her eyes. Then you're that Georgina? Yes, I was going to marry Oliver. He never told me about you. Meg's smile was wry. I'm not surprised. Anne, Will's mother, broke with us after she married again. You are Oliver's father's sister, then? Yes, I'm Jeff's sister. Much younger than he. I remember him as a young, dashing officer, very gay and lively. Will is like him, or he used to be. She glanced at her nephew rather anxiously. But there I go chattering on, and you must be wanting a cup of tea. When did you eat last? Gina told her, and Meg clucked her tongue disgustedly. This time the glance she sent in Will's direction was neither anxious nor affectionate. No wonder you look so pale and tired. Come upstairs and I'll show you where the bathroom is, and the room where you'll sleep tonight. And you can explain why you have come all this way with Will. Gina followed her from the room and up a wide open staircase. The very contemporary style of the house surprised her, and she said so. I suppose you were expecting to stay in an old grey stone house, with quaint dormer windows set in the roof. Typically Scottish in design, said Meg with a laugh. Well, you see, Andrew is an architect by profession, and this house is his own design. We bought this land overlooking the loch a few years ago to get away from the city, and we love it. Nan, my daughter, is especially happy to live out here. She's horse mad, and we have two in the pet dog nearby. By the way, where is she? I thought she went out to greet you. Gina explained, and Meg smiled again. Your kitten will be in good hands. Don't worry. Nan loves all animals. I'm surprised we'll let you bring him. I told him no Blue, no me, and he gave in, said Gina coolly. You surprise me, murmured Meg, giving her guest a slow assessing giving her guest a slow assessing glance. He must have wanted you to come very badly. Will rarely gives in to anyone. If people won't go his way, he usually teaches them. He can be very ruthless at times. Yeah, I'd noticed, said Gina, following her hostess into a small bedroom decorated in bright colors and furnished with simple white furniture. Why did you come with him? Asked Meg. To prove to him that I'm not as soft as I look, and that I'm quite capable of cooking for 20 boys. More, if necessary, replied Gina, and again Meg looked at her curiously. I can see why Will thought you were soft, she said, then added gravely, You won't let him down, will you, Gina? He's been let down rather badly. Another time might be once too often. I've noticed a tendency in him to become rather withdrawn and dour lately. I'll leave you now. When you're ready, come down and we'll have a meal. We'll be able to chat afterwards because Andrew is taking Will to see a friend who is interested in sending his boys to the camp. When Gina eventually went downstairs feeling refreshed after a wash in an unbelievably soft water, she found that Nan had come in and was trying to coax Blue to drink some milk from a saucer. The kitten was backed up against the kitchen wall, his back arched, his eyes wide. I found him in the stable, All the cats go in there because it's warm and cozy in the hay. He's lovely. So he is, but frightened of us, said Nan in a soft, letting voice. She was tall like her mother, and her dark hair waved about her oval-shaped face, which was lit by the blue eyes which were her inheritance from the Fox family. Gina picked up the trembling kitten and stroked his damp fur. His name is Blue. Thank you for finding him. You you're not Bridget, are you? Stammered Nan shyly, her eyes grave and questioning. Of course she isn't. She is Gina, said Gordon in a whisper, glancing over his shoulder at his mother who was busy at the cooker. Who's Bridget? Asked Gina softly. Two pairs of blue eyes regarded her steadily. Then Nan said quietly, She used to live here. She's the daughter of a friend of Mummy's who died. Bridget ran away. Dinner is ready, so if you'd like to tell your father and Will, Gordy, Nan can take Gina through to the dining rooms, said Meg, coming over to them. Leave the kitten here. I'll see that he gets something to eat. Recognizing that Blue was amongst friends, Gina went with Nan and took her place at the dining room table, where she was joined by Andrew and Will. The meal passed pleasantly, almost gaily. There was obviously good rapport between Will and his relatives, and the conversation was scattered with family jokes. As Gina, as she, as Gina ate, she wondered about the terse, whispered conversation which had taken place between herself and Nan. Who was Bridget, and why had she run away? And what had she to do with Will Fox? When the meal was over, the two men excused themselves to go and see the friend of Andrew who was interested in the adventure camp. You'll be all right, I hope, Will said briskly to Gina as he passed her on his way out of the room. Meg will look after you. In case you've gone to bed by the time I come back, just remember that we want to make an early start again, about 9 o'clock. She almost said, yes, sir, and saluted him, amid fashion, but instead she confined herself to making a face at his retreating back. Don't you like Will? Asked the curious, all-observant Nan, who thought the world of her grown-up cousin. Not much, admitted Gina cautiously, thankful that Meg had left the room too. Bridget did. She thought he was a hero. That's why she ran after him and married him, announced Nan. Gina swallowed this amazing piece of information without a tremor, hoping she did not look as astonished as she felt. But her liking for him can't have lasted because she ran away from him, so Mom says, continued Nan, who, like many girls of her age, was fascinated by the complicated relationships of adults. We haven't seen or heard from her since. Mom keeps hoping she'll turn up one day, but Daddy thinks she's dead. So that was why Meg's voice had risen in hope when she had noticed that Will had someone with him. When were they married? Asked Gina. Oh, years ago. About 7 years, I suppose. Bridget was only 18. She went to London and then to Germany, where Will was stationed then. She sent Mommy a photograph taken after they were married. It's upstairs. Mommy daren't have it down here in case Will sees it. Bridget was very pretty. She was always combing her hair and making up her face. I can remember watching her when I was little. Would you like to see the photo? Uh, Perhaps you shouldn't take it from your mother's room. Gina demurred. She might not want me to see it. She won't mind. I expect she'll tell you all about Bridget because you're going to work for Will. I mean, it wouldn't do for you to fall in love with him, seeing how he's married, would it? Gina repressed a desire to inform Nan, in her tartest tones, that there wasn't the slightest possibility of falling in love with Will, and the girl went off to get the photograph. While Nan was away, Meg reappeared and took Gina off to the living room where Gordy had settled on the floor in front of the television. Meg took out her knitting and, with a few questions, soon knew how Will had found Gina and had asked her to go and cook for him. I think I can understand the way his mind was working, she said. He would be thinking it would be good for you to get away from Birmingham and the associations with Oliver. He would be understanding how you felt. He knows what's it like to lose a loved one. You mean Bridget? Asked Gina. Has he told you about her? Very little, replied Gina, thinking of Will's terse comment about marriage and how it hadn't worked for him. It was such a shock to us when he wrote to tell us she'd run away from him, said Meg. She had lived with us for about 2 years. I gave her a home when her mother, a good friend of mine, died quite suddenly of a heart attack. Her father disappeared into the blue years ago, and now it seems as if Bridget has inherited his vanishing tricks. I found her stubborn and very difficult to handle, but I assumed that she was awkward because she had lost her mother at a crucial age. She was always wanting to stay out late at night. Then Will came here on leave. She thought he was wonderful and he took her out several times. We went back to Germany and soon afterwards Bridget ran away from me. I didn't hear from her until she wrote to say she met Will again and they were to be married. Meg sighed and took the photograph from Nan, who had come back into the room. She showed it to Gina, who gazed at the small, pretty young woman with curling long hair and white set eyes, laughing up at a younger Will in uniform, who looked rather serious on his wedding day. Hasn't he tried to find her? She asked. Yes, whenever he could. 4 years ago, he left the army and we didn't hear from him for a while. Then one day, he turned up here to say he had bought a place in the Highlands and that he intended to farm there. Not a word about Bridget then or since. If I mention her, he always changes the subject. We have no idea whether he found her or not. She could be dead for all we know. Meg concentrated on her knitting until she finished her row. Then she looked up and gazed at Gina with those clear, observant eyes. Bridget wasn't unlike you, she said. She was small and soft. Kitten soft. Will had called her on their first meeting, thought Gina, and she wondered uneasily whether she had reminded him too of his wife. But the warmth of the room was making her feel drowsy, and Meg noticed. I heard you being given orders about an early start tomorrow morning, she said, with a humorous twitch to her lips. So I think you'd better go to bed. The journey has taken a lot out of you today, and Will won't have noticed. Basically, he's a good person, but he tends to forget that others aren't as strong as he is. Now I've put the electric blanket on in your bed, and I noticed Will had put your cases in the room for you. I hope you have some warm nightwear for sleeping in. Well, I hope you have some warm nightwear for sleeping in when you get to the clan. It can be cold at night up there, even in May and June. Gina found the bed blissfully warm, and she was soon asleep. She slept dreamlessly and heard nothing until someone banged on the door hard enough to make it tremble. 8:30, George. Want some breakfast before we go? Called a familiar masculine voice. Yeah, please. Then show a leg. The rain had stopped, and the view from the bedroom window showed her the famous lock, shimmering in pale sunlight, with wreaths of pearly mist rising from it. In the distance, rising above the mist, she could see the sharp outline of a snow-covered mountain peak shining against the sky. Shivering in the cool air, she dressed quickly in warm woolen pants, a sweater, and suede jacket. In the mirror, her face looked surprisingly rested, the skin glowing faintly, the eyes bright and alert. Her hair was a tangle, and she had time only to give it a few sweeps with the brush before tying it back with a chiffon scarf. No time for divatating, was Will Fox waiting for her, or he'd have no compunction about invading the room to hurry her along. A hard man who drove others hard and who had possibly driven his wife away from me. Breakfast was a good wholesome meal at which the whole of the Maxwell family were present. Gina ate everything, remembering the hunger during the journey of the previous day. As soon as she had finished eating, Will rose from the table saying it was time they left. Blue was placed in his basket under the canvas cover of the truck along with Gina's suitcases. And soon, the truck was turning away from the house, and Gina was waving goodbye to the assembled Maxwells. The road north wound close beside the lake and offered fascinating glimpses of the smooth stretch of water from beneath the down-curving branches of leafless large trees or through the interlacing branches of the dark pines. Feeling rested and comfortable, entranced by the serene beauty of scenery so different from that of her home county, Gina asked questions, and her companion, also in a better mood than on the previous day, answered her pleasantly and informatively. Soon she knew that the name of the snow-capped mountain rearing up on the opposite shores of the loch was Ben Lamont, that the names of all the islands she could see began with the word ink, and as the loch narrowed and they twisted through a village called Tibet, that the name meant small neck of land or isthmus, and that the village was in fact on the isthmus created by the closeness isth- isth- isthmus 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 created by the closeness of the head of the Loch Long at the point to Loch Lomond. With the lines of communication open, Gina was encouraged to ask more questions about their destination, and learned that they were bound for a place called Glangor. It means green or blue glen, explained Will, and that describes it pretty well. In the summer, it's all greens and blues. How far is it from here? Close on 120 miles by road. If you'd like, you see exactly where it is. There's a map book underneath your seat. Look at the map showing the northwest of Scotland, and you should be able to find it. It's in the area north of Liverpool. She did as he suggested, and eventually found the glen, a narrow strip of green winding between masses of grey, which gave way to a strip of pale blue called Loch Gone, which opened onto the bigger mass of blue, representing the sea. Looking at the key to the map, Gina discovered that gray in all shades represented land above 500 feet above sea level. There didn't seem to be any road of any importance leading to the glen or through it. Only a white line, which according to the key meant narrow country road unsurfaced. Why, it's miles away from anywhere, she exclaimed. Whatever made you choose a place like that to live? I didn't. They chose me, was the laconic, bewildering reply. How? He was silent, seeming more interested in maneuvering the vehicle around a bend on the outskirts of Crianlarich than in answering her question. Crianlarich. Loch Lomond was now behind them, and they faced the gradual pull up to Rannoch Moor. Not receiving an answer, Gina glanced up from the map at Will, wondering whether to repeat her question, but the expression on his face prevented her from speaking. He was staring ahead, his eyes narrowed, his jaw rigid and rock-like. His mouth bitterly curved as he dealt with obviously unpleasant thoughts. He spoke suddenly in a harsh voice. A few years ago, not long after I came out of the army, I felt a great need to get away by myself. I decided to explore the Highlands alone. There I hoped to find glens, moors, and mountains unblemished by dams, pylons, and skylifts. And if I found any people, I hoped that they would be simple, kindly souls, untouched by the red race. He stopped speaking almost as abruptly as he had begun, and Gina, surprised by the savagery of his outburst, was able to ask, "Did you find what you hoped for?" "Yes, I did. I found rest and peace, unchanging stability, and a sense of the importance of old values, none of which I'd ever known before. I spent 2 days climbing in nearby blizzards conditions in the area near Glengong, because an old man I had met on the road said that I would see paradise from the top of a certain mountain. I was on the top of Ben Siege when the cloud broke suddenly. Sunlight appeared and glinted in a sheet of water. It was like a momentary glimpse of paradise, of a promised land. I hurried down the mountain and made my way towards the loch. That, that night, I slept in my tent beside the loch in a copse of birch trees, with the sound of a torrent roaring in the glen. He paused again, and this time Gina didn't ask any questions. She was too busy grappling with yet another new aspect of Will Fox. Why had he found it necessary to get away alone? Had the disappearance of his young wife affected him more deeply than he had cared to admit to anyone? Next day, he continued, more quietly. When I awoke and looked out, not a ripple broke the smooth blue surface of the loch, which reflected silent white hills and the dark ruins of an old tower built on a promontory. Near the tower, I found a house, deserted but in good repair. There were fields around it that had once been tilled. In a state of great excitement, I decided I would live there and farm. As soon as I could, I went down to Ullapool and inquired about the place. It was for sale. House, fields, mules, and a half a mountain. The whole clan, in fact. In the grip of a strange fascination, I made an offer for it. It was accepted immediately. I lived there ever since. How long? 4 years this coming Easter. 18 months by myself, except for Lachi Monroe. Oh, it's Lachi. Lachi Monroe, who is the only crofter in the clan. The rest of the time, Kevin Anderson has been there with me setting up the buildings for the adventure camp. He chuckled reminiscently. We had a great time erecting the huts, which I bought at an auction. We finished them just before the first batch of youngsters arrived last year. What do you do with the boys? She asked. Try to pass on to them skills which have given me so much pleasure in my life. What are they? Climbing, camping, sailing, canoeing, fishing, forest law, also simple rules for survival in the wilderness. Oh, that reminds me, I didn't ask you. Have you any other skill besides cooking? Gina thought of the dingy sailing which she had done since she was 10, sharing the boat with her brothers. She hadn't done much since she had met Oliver, but she knew it was a skill which she would never lose. I can sail a dinghy, she offered, diffidently. Luke, my eldest brother, and I once won a junior championship. He flashed her an interested glance. Huh, good for you, he murmured. You'll be of more use than I'd hoped. You can help out with the sailing instruction when the weather is suitable. Gina forbore to remind him that she would not be staying very long in Glengorm, only until Gavin's wife was able to cope again. She was finding that she had no wish to fight with Wilfox this morning. Knowledge of his failed marriage was making her view him quite differently. He wasn't just a rough, tough ex-soldier, accustomed to giving orders and getting his own way. He was a man who had loved and lost, who had made a mistake and had paid for it. His mood also was softer, as if he was feeling the influence of the place he had made his home. He was less relentless in his desire to reach it, and even condescended to stop at the bridge of Orchie. For a while they leaned together on the ancient stone structure, watching the river swirling down from the loch top, comparing it with that other place, Placid River they had watched in Stratford. The air was cold and sharp, but invigorating. The brown moors were silent, stretching away endlessly to the distant mountains. No traffic passed them. They had all that Sunday morning to themselves. They could have been the only people alive in the world. Lunch was taken leaning against the truck where it was parked on a grassy sward beside another river further north, beyond the ramparts of Ben Nevis. Blue, sniffing and curious, trampled the grass happily. There were few signs of spring even though the sunshine was warm. Few signs of spring even though the sunshine was warm. The afternoon was spent traveling deeper and deeper into the mountains along a winding road, past, past solitary crofts and remote dark forests. There was very little traffic, although Will assured Gina that the same road would be busy with caravans and cars in the summer. The lack of traffic and of people gave Gina a sense of aloneness and insignificance, which was increased by the strange shapes of some of the mountains. By the time the sun was slipping down the sky, she was a willing prisoner to the image of the Highlands as presented to her that day of April. There was enchantment in the landscape as burns, forests, and mountains unfolded before her when the road wound on past Archnasheen, Arknasheen, and Loch, a Croisic, Croisic, through the lifting, wilting land. When the sun had gone, the light lingered long in the west. But darkness came inevitably, and there were still many miles to go. Steadily the truck ground onwards. Hunger gurgled noisily in Gina's stomach, and her head nodded. She felt rather than saw the last bend in the road because she was pitched towards Will and then away from him again. Then they were gliding downwards towards the faint shimmer of water. She could just make out the bulk of a tower against the clear starlit sky. She saw a white house gleaming amongst the delicate tracery of branches. The vehicle stopped. The engine was cut, and in the silence she could hear the lowing of a cow from a barn. There were no lights shining from the house, and she sensed an uneasiness in her companion as he sat still for a moment. I wonder where everyone is, he said at last, and opened the door on his side. He jumped out. Gina left the truck more slowly and stiffly. The air was cold and crisp, and she could hear water lapping on an unseen shore. She was aware that Will had gone to the house and was opening the porch door. She heard him yell rudely, his voice abrasive. "Kevin? Mage? Where the hell are you?" The only echo of his own voice answered him. He disappeared and Gina waited. From the back of the truck came the inevitable, pitiable mewing of the kitten. Remembering how he had run away the previous evening, Gina decided to wait until Will came back to her before she attempted to take the kitten out of the truck. She felt the wood like a little light on the subject before she made any move. Standing there in the starlit dark, listening to the soft lap of the water on a shore, hearing the faint soughing of the wind in the branches of trees, she was aware of a strange thread forming in her mind. Where were Gavin and Madge Anderson? Why hadn't they answered Will's call? Why were there no lights in the house? There was probably a perfectly reasonable answer to her questions, but she could not help recalling Maxwell's anxious remark about Will having been let down rather badly once, and that the next time he was let down might be once too often and have a detrimental effect on him. Was it possible that the Andersons had let him down? Gina shivered and would have given anything in that moment to have been back in Birmingham in her own comfortable flat, instead of standing in the damp darkness of a Highland glare, waiting for the reappearance of the man who had brought her there. Oh man, oh. Uh, oh man, my jaw. Okay. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Light flickered out from one of the ground floor windows of the house. Gina guessed it came from an oil lamp which had just been lit. The faint glow grew in strength as she waited and watched. Then Will spoke from the doorway. His voice was loud and harsh, shattering the silence and making her jump. "Aren't you coming in?" he barked. Yes, yes, of course, she called back, thinking he didn't sound very welcoming. But I'd like to get Blue out first. I can't see a thing. You'll have to get used to the darkness. We don't have street lighting in the clan, he replied, sardonically. Gina's heart sank a little. A softer, more kindly mood had evaporated. Once more he was the tough army captain issuing orders. He reached under the canvas cover for Blue, swore and withdrew his hand quickly as the kittens crushed him. Here, you get him out, he growled at her. I'll take the cases. Blue felt soft and warm. Gina was comforted by the feel of her pet, who was a familiar friend in that unfamiliar place. Cautiously, she followed Will along a path to the door of the house and stepped into a porch, and then through another door into a narrow hallway. From there, they went into a room from which the light came. It was a big room with bare stone walls which had been painted a cheerful yellow. The wooden floor had been sanded and varnished, and was scattered with bright rugs. The furniture was mixed. Comfortable armchairs set about a stone fireplace, a big roll-topped desk, a pretty oval-shaped gate-legged table on which the oil lamp hissed and flared. Gina stood hesitantly, hugging Blue close to her, rubbing her cheek against his fur as Will set down her cases beside the desk. He glanced across at her, and his mouth quirked sardonically. I'm beginning to feel a little sorry for Noel. In retrospect, of course, he murmured. Why? He had to compete with that kitten for your love. He didn't have to do anything of the sort, she retorted, indignantly, surprised by the sudden attack. I loved him just as much as I loved Blue. The sardonic twist became more apparent. Just as much. Not more than, he queried, jeeringly. Then I reckon all is better off where he is. At least he won't suffer delusionment, finding out that you loved him only as much as you love your pet. That isn't what I meant at all, she flared. I loved Oliver in a totally different way from the way I loved Blue. He didn't have to compete with anyone. Anyway, he wasn't like you. I would never have to run away from him, as your wife ran away from you. The words were no sooner out of her mouth than she regretted them. She didn't usually go in for wounding people deliberately. She couldn't think why she had said them except that there had been an overriding need to retaliate, to hurt him as much as he seemed intent on hurting her. His eyes were hard, soulless blue, making her doubt whether it was possible to hurt him. So Meg talked, did she? He said coolly. Just as well, really. Saves me the trouble. And maybe it'll stop you from getting any sloppy ideas. And now to find out why Gavin and Mage have skipped. There should be a note somewhere. Her heart sinking even lower, Gina followed him out of the room because he took the lamp with him. Shadows pranced on the walls of the hallway as they went down into another big room, which was obviously the kitchen. It was well equipped with cupboards and cooking facilities. In the middle of the floor was a long table with benches on either side. Obviously, the campers ate their meals there. The note was on the table, a single sheet of paper held down by a water jug. Gina looked around the room while Will read it, not daring to watch the expression on his face change. The sound of the paper being scrunched by a hand drew her attention, and, fascinated, She watched Will's long fingers curled around the note with a viciousness which frightened her. She expected him to swear, but all he said was, I might have guessed. The little. She never heard what he intended to call either Mage or Gavin because he didn't finish the sentence. But she guessed it wasn't complimentary. What's wrong? She asked hesitantly. His face was dark, his eyes looking paler and harder than ever. He tossed the crumpled note onto the table. Read it, he barked, and went out of the room. Still clutching Blue, Gina picked up the note and straightened it out. It was written in a rather schoolboyish scribble. Dear Will, I've had to take Madge down to her parents' home. She feels she can't stand this place no longer. Personally, I think that it's her condition which is making her hypersensitive to atmosphere. But there's nothing I can do about it. If I don't take her away, she says she'll leave me. I like to say that we'd be coming back once the child is born, but somehow I don't think that will happen. Sorry to let you down. I hope you'll understand why I've had to put it first. It was good while it lasted, Will. For me, at any rate. Good luck, Gavin. So her intuitive feeling that the Andersons had deserted Will had been right, thought Jenna, as she placed the note back on the table. Once again, Will had been let down. They must have gone while his back had been turned because they had been unable to tell him to his face that they wanted to leave. In order to get her own way with her husband, Madge had used a weapon Gavin had known that Will would appreciate. She had threatened to leave him if he did not do as she wished. No wonder Will had been tempted to call Madge rude names. Instead of standing there clutching her pet and shivering, she should be showing some spirit and doing something to help soften the blow which the desertion of the Andersons must be to Will. Meg Maxwell had been afraid of how another letdown might affect him. Well, the new cook and bottle washer was going to make sure that it brought him nothing but benefits. Setting Blue down on the floor, Gina went over to the cooker. It was big and shiny and possessed several burners, on one of which was a kettle. She filled the kettle with water. Instinctively, she found matches and the gas storage cylinder. She turned on the regulator to release the gas from the container, then turned on one of the burners and lit it before placing the kettle on it. Soon, she was searching cupboards for food and cooking equipment. Her weariness evaporated miraculously as she worked, and soon she was humming to herself as she pottered about. Lou was silenced with some turned milk, and by the time Will returned to the kitchen, after bringing in all the luggage from the truck, the table was set at one end for two people, the smell of soup being heated, and something savory being cooked in the oven made the kitchen seem the homely, welcoming place it should be. Hearing Gina humming a tune he often whistled himself, Will grinned at her. I never thought I'd hear someone as prudish as you singing a song like that. He teased her. Do you know what's it about? Seduction, she guessed, color flaming wildly in her cheeks as she met his amused glance. He looked less violent now. She was relieved to see. Yeah, in the nicest possible sense, he replied. And with a happy ending, the food smells good. How soon can we eat? In about 15 minutes. I've made some tea. I expect you could too with the cup. I know I could, she said. After that blow beneath the belt from the Andersons, I think I'm in need of something stronger, he remarked, going over to a cupboard and taking down a bottle of whiskey. He poured some into a glass, then leaned against the table and sipped some of it, and watched her pouring tea. You look very much at home, he commented, noting how the effort of preparing the meal had loosened some of her hair from the chiffon scarf which tied it back, so that corkscrew ringlets dangled tantalizingly about her flushed cheeks. The expression in his eyes disturbed her, making her suddenly very aware of her position alone with him in his house, miles away from anywhere, preparing his evening meal as if she were his wife. She looked away from that disturbing blue gaze and squeaked a question from her throat, which was dry. What are you going to do now that Kevin and Major have gone? Carry on. What else can I do? With 20 live, well, with 20 lively youngsters and their two social workers arriving tomorrow, I can hardly change everything now. Anyway, you here, and a good cook on the premises means that half the battle is won. I can manage the instruction courses myself, and we can organize the lads to help with the washing up. He paused and gave her a strange, underbrowed glance. Unless it's in your mind to do a disappearing act too, he tacked on. Bitterness made his voice harsh again and edged lines from his mouth. But she noticed there was no soft pity there. I'm not in the habit of letting people down, she returned, loftily, looking at him down her straight, shapely nose. I said I'd help you until Mage was able to cope again, he reminded her dryly. But you see, Mage won't be coming back ever. And there's the camp in May to get through as well as the summer camps. And all those letters to answer from hopeful youngsters wanting to come in cupboards to stock with food. She sent him a wide-eyed glance. His gaze met hers steadily. He was not appealing to her for himself. He was making her feel that if she didn't stay, she would be letting down all sorts of people she had never met. I'll stay until you find someone else to help you. No longer, she said. His mouth twitched and dark eyelashes hid his eyes as he looked down at his drink. Good for you, George, he said softly. Now I know where I stand. But what about other help? You will take Gavin's place. Do you know anyone else who would be willing to come and live here? She asked. I know of someone who is interested. He replied vaguely and tossed off the remains of his whiskey. Then he gave her another penetrating stare. No one, I repeat, no one is irreplaceable in this life, George. Neither a partner, nor a wife, nor yet a fiancé. That's done. Again her wide glance flew to his and stayed briefly, only to fall away before the intensity of his. Her distress must have shown in her face because he put out a hand and touched her gently on the cheek. She flinched away from his touch and turned on him like an angry cat. He smiled gently. All right, kitten, he soothed. My intention was only to comfort you. I know you believe that no one can ever take the place of Oliver. But that isn't true. Someone else will come along one day, and that old chemistry will start working. And before you know where you are, you'll be wanting to share his bed. Never! She spat at him. Anyway, that isn't why I wanted to marry Oliver. We both agreed that the physical aspect of marriage was the least important part. We wanted to marry for other reasons too. He raised his eyebrows and whistled jeeringly. Don't you now? He drawled, and devilment danced in his eyes. How very civilized of we both. I had a feeling that might have been the way of it. You're remarkably unawakened for a young woman who was about to be married only 10 days ago. Far be it from me to criticize his methods of wooing you. I suppose he knew what he was doing. After all, he was a doctor. He snuffed and jerked his head in the direction of the cuckoo. Something seems to require your attention over there. I'll go and wash my hands and hope that when I come back the drop will be ready to eat. I'm famished. He left the room again, whistling that tantalizingly familiar tune which she realized now she had been humming to herself. Hand to the chick he had touched, which seemed harder than the other. She attended to the soup which had been about to boil over. She wondered if she would ever learn to avoid falling into the traps Will Fox set forward to fall into during the course of conversation. He set them, she was sure, for his own amusement because her innocent, serious replies made him laugh. How on earth was she going to work for and live with him for most of the summer? Live with him. The word screamed through her mind like warning. That was just what she was going to do. She was going to live alone with him in this house without the chaperonage of the Andersons unless there was another house where she could live. While they were eating, she approached the new problem in a roundabout way, wary of any scoffing remarks he might make. She asked first of all where the Andersons had lived. Yeah, in this house on a temporary basis. Gav was going to build a house, but I kept putting it off. I think he knew as much as I did that Madge wouldn't stick it out here, he replied tersely. Did you sleep in one of the huts? She asked diffidently. He looked up puzzled. No. Why should I? This is my house. And it's big enough to house 3 families, let alone one. They had the 3rd floor. I sleep on the 2nd floor. But when the campers are here, don't you sleep in the bunkhouse then? He gave her a rather pitying glance. Look, George, some of the lads and lasses who come are almost 20. None of them is younger than 15. Even if they come without an adult leader, I reckon they're quite old enough to sleep in the bunkhouse without supervision. Now, come clean and tell me what's really on your mind. You're not very good at the flank attack. Living alone here with you, she gulped, hastily, and her face burned red again. He stared at her for a few seconds, obviously taken aback. I'm not sure how to take that remark. Seems to me you're casting aspersions on my character, he said in frost-bitten tones. I'm sorry, she muttered. I didn't mean to. I just thought it might look odd to other people, you and I living in the same house where we're not married or anything. Under the dagger-swift glance of his eyes, his spirit quailed, and a voice trailed away to silence. I see, he said, and although there was still a sprinkling of frost, his voice was slightly warmer. He rubbed his chin reflectively with one hand. Without Gavin and Madge here, there might be gossip. Is that what you're getting at? She nodded and couldn't prevent her face from flaming again. Well, there's nothing we can do about that. he replied calmly. I must say the thought hadn't occurred to me, and I can assure you that it won't occur to our nearest neighbor, Latchy Monroe. But now that you mention it, I can see that it might create difficulties later. He paused and frowned, rubbing his chin again, gazing with narrowed eyes at nothing, as if a new thought had struck him. Then he shrugged and looked at her. Not to worry, George. If anyone is unpleasant, I'll deal with them. Of course, if you'd really prefer to sleep in the bunkhouse, you can, but don't expect me to move out of here. She hesitated, not knowing what to say. His calm attitude was making her feel as if she had made a fuss about nothing. His eyes had begun to twinkle again as he noticed her hesitation, and she wished she had kept her mouth shut in the first place. No, he cautioned. Don't decide yet. Wait until I've shown you the room where you're going to sleep. Madge decorated it all ready for the new cook. I've put your luggage up there, and it's a flight of stairs above mine, if that makes you feel any easier. The bunkhouse is alright, but rough. And once the campers come, you'd have no privacy there. She went with him, meekly up the stairs to the third floor. There were two large attic bedrooms, one of which had been the Andersons. Wall led her into the other, and in the soft light cast by the oil lamp, which he placed on the high Victorian chest of drawers, she could see that the room had been recently decorated. Well, what do you think? Here or the bunkhouse? He asked. Yeah, she muttered, avoiding his mocking gaze. I thought that would be the way of it, he remarked dryly. He pushed her hand across the forehead in a gesture of weariness. The bed under its old-fashioned patchwork cover looked inviting, and she longed for nothing more than to climb into it and sleep. As she lowered her hand, Oliver's diamond ring, which she still wore on the third finger of her left hand, caught the light and flashed brightly. Wolf's eyes narrowed and hardened when he saw it. Huh, you're tired, he observed briskly. I'll get the sheets for the bed. You may as well turn in now. His concern surprised her. She had thought he didn't notice when anyone was tired. But the dishes, she began. Hey, I'll do them, he replied curtly. He left the room, returning within a few seconds with clean sheets and pillow slips. He was followed by Blue, who entered stealthily, ears cocked and tail on high. What shall I do about Blue? Asked Gina. Do you really want to know what I think you should do with him? He asked, looking down at the kitten menacingly. No, she said quickly. Then don't ask foolish questions. He's your responsibility, not mine. And as long as I don't find him curled up on my bed, I don't care a hang where he sleeps. Good night, George. He went out, closing the door behind him. But the old-fashioned latch had hardly settled into place. Then it lifted again, and he put his head around the jab. Devilment was back in his eyes, blue and twinkling. I'm afraid there's no lock on this door, but I know of a trick which I've found useful in the past when I haven't wanted to be disturbed. He came in, closed the door, slipped across to an old chair with a tall leather back, picked it up, and going back to the door, tilted the chair against it so that the door rung off the leather back rested under the latch. It won't keep a determined intruder out, but it will slow him down considerably, he said with a grin. Then lifting the chair away, He opened the door and went out again, the grin still wickedly flickering as he murmured, "Good night. Sleep well." You got 2 minutes. Ooh, yeah, we're gonna be here for a while. Row, row, row your boat. Bathroom break. I'll be right back. Oh. Okay. She did sleep well, worn out with the journey as well as the strange emotional upheaval coming north with Will Fox had caused within her. She did not wake until the flat of her hand hit the old door, making it tremble and causing Blue to jump up onto the bed, spitting and growling with fright. "Show a leg, George!" Will sounded as vigorous as usual, It's 7:30. Breakfast is ready, and this is the last time I cooking this week. If you're not down in 10 minutes, I'll come and drag you out of bed. The air felt chilly to the end of her nose, and she was reluctant to move from the warm bed. But she couldn't risk having him come in and pull her from the bed as he had threatened. No wonder Bridget had run away from him, if that was the sort of treatment she had had to put up with, she thought. And then she reprimanded herself for her unkind thought. Will was probably just as capable of treating someone he loved as gently as the next man was, and considering the circumstances, perhaps it was best if he were rough with her. Blue was rubbing against the door, asking to be let out, so, flinging back the bedclothes, Gina braved the chilliness of her first morning in the Highlands, and hurried to open the door. The kitten slid through the opening and padded away downstairs. Opening the floor-printed curtains, Gina gazed out. Four slender silver birches, their trunks gilded by morning sunlight, made a frame for a picture of winter-bleached moorland, sloping down to a blue loch behind which a mountain reared, a perfect cone topped with sunlit icing where the snow reflected the morning light. While she stared entranced by the wild alien landscape, a pair of swans flew over the loch and slid heavily into the water, spattering it with silver ripples. Excited by the sight of them, she dressed quickly and went downstairs. Will was sitting at the table eating and looking at some letters. Gina went over to the oven and took out her breakfast, then sat down at the place set for her. I have just seen two swans land on the lake. The loch, she announced, unable to keep the excitement out of her voice. His reaction surprised her. He looked up sharply, his eyes widening. Say that again, he ordered. She repeated what she had said and added, Is that so unusual? You look very surprised. With an obvious effort, he collected himself and shrugged. Just a sign that spring is on its way, he murmured evasively. Oh, it does come here then. I was beginning to wonder whether if it came when I saw the snow on the mountain top, she said dryly. You will find other signs, if you care to look, he replied with a grin. Such as? Flowers, hiding in warm, sheltered crannies. Oh, what sort? Gina was delighted. She glanced at the bare formica top of the table and imagined it covered with a pretty cloth and an arrangement of spring flowers in the center. Primroses. When you're finished eating, grab a jacket and I'll show you around the place. I might even show you where the primroses are. Outside, the air was sharp but fresh. There was no sound other than that of cold water running here and there through rocks and lank brown heather or lapping at the shores of the loch. Will showed her the copse where he had camped the first time he had come to the glen, and made her listen for the sound of the torrent inland, which had lulled him to sleep. Just 4 years ago, he said, there's quite a difference in the place since then. Come and see the bunkhouses. On their way to the timber huts, which were situated on a plateau of land close to the rockside to the right of the house, they passed a barn. A tall man with a shock of graying hair who was wearing denim dungarees over a thick woolen shirt appeared in the doorway. Ah, Good morning, Lecce. Will greeted him. This is George. She's come to cook for the campus. "Ah, good day to you, miss," said the other man. His round, innocent blue eyes had a slightly dazed look in them as he regarded her pants. "When did the Andersons leave?" asked Will. "I'm thinking it would be a day or two after you left," said Lecce, wrinkling his forehead. She was after giving him no peace. She'll be no loss to the clan. Perhaps you're right, said Will. But I shall miss Gavin. Aye, he was a grand lad. It's a pity. So it is that he was caught, murmured Lecce, who was still furtively eyeing Gina. Have you been seeing the swans? Not yet, but George has. When did they come? Will sounded a little uneasy at the mention of the big white birds. The evening before last, just as the sun was setting. Ah, I couldn't believe my own eyes, said Lecce, and chuckled suddenly. The expression in his eyes now decidedly impish as he looked from Gina to Will and then back to Gina again. I should have known you'd be bringing a bony lass with you. He turned back into the barn and then continued on their way to the bunkhouse. Will led the way, striding quickly, a frown on his face. What did he mean by saying he should have known you'd be bringing me with you? Asked Gina as soon as she could catch up with him. She had read that the Highlanders often believed in second sight, and she wondered whether Lecce possessed the ability to see into the future. He was referring to an ancient legend about the clan, said Will curtly. You'll find that the Highlanders usually have some tale to tell about the places in which they live. They use them to explain anything which is strange about the place. It's best to listen to them with a grain of salt. I've no time for such stories myself. No, I've no time for them. This one has disturbed you for some reason, thought Gina, grimacing at his broad back as he opened the door of the nearest bunkhouse. And she decided that she would ask Lecce Monroe as soon as she could tell her the legend of the Swans. Although there was a certain amount of pride in Will's bearing as he showed her the bunkhouses with their rows of camp beds, showers, wash basins, and drying rooms, which he had erected with the help of Gavin and Lecce, the enthusiasm with which he had set out had waned. His withdrawal became more and more noticeable as they returned to the house. His mind was obviously not on what he was doing, and he had forgotten to show her where she would find primroses. Perhaps it was just as well, thought Gina with a sigh as she looked around the clean, well-equipped kitchen after she had finished clearing up the breakfast dishes. After all, she was not there to decorate the place, as Will had pointed out, nor to soften the house's uncompromising austerity and masculinity. She was there as a volunteer to help out until another partner could be found to help run the camps. After a midday meal with Lecce, after a midday meal which Lecce shared with them, Will went off to Loconvie to collect a post which might have arrived while he had been away. He didn't invite Gina to accompany him, but gave her instructions about making sure the beds in the bunkhouses were ready and to prepare dinner for the hungry youths expected that evening. When she had done all she could in the way of preparation, Gina realized that Blue was missing. Going outside, she found the afternoon was mild and sunny. Down the slope from the house, the log dimpled under the caress of a slight breeze, and the dark tower had lost some of its tower aspect. She called to Blue and wandered down the path to the lock. Near the small curving beach of shingle, the two swans sat. At her at her approach, they reared their necks and hissed, then waddled down to the water and took off to swim sedately away. From high above her head, Gina heard the plaintive but unmistakable cry of a kitten. Looking upwards at the tower, she saw a cheeky blue-grey face peeping out of an opening in the ruin. "Oh, Blue, you're not a kitten. How did you get there? Come down at once," she called. Blue merely put his head on one side and looked mischievous. Gina approached the tower more closely. "Come down, Blue," she ordered. "Do not be worrying about the weak cat, miss," said a voice nearby, and looking round she saw Latchy sitting on a rough stone bench near the entrance to the tower. He was enjoying the sunshine and quiet smoke of his pipe. "If you'd be after sitting down for a wee while, the cat will come down in its own good time," he added. "Ah, it's a lovely day." "So it is, and we're in no hurry. No hurry at all." Listening to the lazy drone of his voice and seeing the expression of permanent pleasure on his lined, weather-beaten face, Gina guessed that Ledger had never been in a hurry in his life. Accepting the invitation to dawdle with him for a while, she sat down on the bench next to him and leaned back against the rough stone of the tower. The sunshine was warm on her skin, and when she closed her eyes, it glowed behind her eyelids. "Ah, it's a free and easy life, so it is," continued Latchy, his voice making slow music in the soft air. "I can shoot a deer if it comes on my craft, and I can fish in the burns and in the sea. If I need extra money, I can come and work for Wolf Box or go to Liverpool to mend fish boxes. You'll be knowing the old Gaelic saying, perhaps?" "Oh no, I know nothing about the Gaels," said Gina humbly. "Then there's a lot for you to be learning," he said. "It goes like this. When God made time, he made plenty of it. Remember that, and you will never be suffering from indigestion," said Lecce wisely. "And now you'll be telling which part of England you come from." She told him, and then listened to a long story about the time he had visited Birmingham during the Second World War. "And is that big marketplace, the Bull Ring, still there?" he asked, coming to the end of his tale. "Yes, but it's all been rebuilt since you were there. You wouldn't recognize it now," she replied. "And there'll be too much traffic, I'm thinking, and people in a hurry," he murmured. "Ah, you're better off living here, where it's quiet and no one in a hurry, not even Will. For all he has the ways of a conqueror, he can take it easy and slow when he's mind to it. Easy and slow. That was the title of the folk song which Will whistled. But the song wasn't about work. It was about the slow, sly seduction of a young woman, suggestive in its lilting melody and phrasing. Yes, she could imagine Will Fox conquering a woman by easy, slow methods. He found his usual direct method of attack failing to win him what he wanted. How long have you lived in the clan?" she asked Lecce. "Since I was a young man. I took over my grandfather's craft just after the war." "Are you married?" "I was, but my wife went away. The clan cannot hold a woman. Oh, it couldn't until 2 days ago." "Oh?" Why is that? Asked Gina, her interest caught. Lecce pointed with the stem of his pipe at the swans which were still sailing slowly on the water. They have come back after being away for almost 300 years, he intoned. But I thought they came here each spring, said Gina. There has been no swan seen in Glengorm since the chief of the MacNeil clan lived in this tower, he replied. When was that? In the 17th century. He was a soldier too, fighting for King Charles II. Once when he came back to his inheritance, which included this glen, all of that mountain and the big castle on the other side of it, he brought a young bride with him. She came from the south, like you. Lovely she was, but as shy and timid as a rodeo. She preferred living in the tower to living in the castle. She liked to feed the swans when she felt lonely, and she was often lonely because she was barren and bore no children. And her husband, the chief of the clan, was often away. And she paused to relight his pipe. Gina, enthralled by the story which she guessed was the legend to which Will had referred, watched the swans and imagined the slight figure of a young woman dressed in a long gown, with ringlets of hair falling over her shoulders, standing on the shore, throwing pieces of bread to the big birds. Then, one day she disappeared, said Latchy, his pipe going to his satisfaction. In the autumn it was, when the leaves were gold and russet, and the heather turned brown. She went when the swans flew south. All winter she was away. The people of the glen said she had gone with the swans she loved, back to her own place and people, turning into a swan maiden and flying with the birds. They said she would come back when the swans returned in the spring. They said that to comfort the chief, who was broken-hearted when he could not find his dear one. Did he ever find her? Asked Gina in an awed whisper. She was finding the similarity of the story to the little she knew about Will Fox's marriage rather disconcerting. No. All that winter he waited, and when the spring came he watched. But the swans never came, nor did his wife. The next year it was the same, and in all the years that followed neither his wife nor the swans were seen in the glen again. After a while the chief married again, but his new wife would not stay in the glen. Gradually all the women left the crofts, and since then no woman has been able to stay in the glen. My own grandfather did not take over his croft until his wife had died. And my father did not dare to live here because his wife would not come. What a strange story, murmured Gina. But surely there was some reasonable explanation for the young woman's disappearance. Perhaps she drowned in the loch, or something like that. She flew away with the swans, said Latchy stubbornly, and the glen has been cursed ever since then. Are there any of the MacNeil's descendants living near here? Asked Gina, deciding not to argue with him. Ah, yes. Mistress MacNeil comes to the castle at Easter and stays there until the autumn. The rest of the time, she's away in some warm climate. Florida or the Mediterranean or some such place. She is the chief of the clan now, since her old father died, leaving no male heir. She married this Star-Spangled Scot for his money and persuaded him to change his name to MacNeil. Star-Spangled Scot? Repeated Gina with a laugh. What do you mean? He's an American with Scottish ancestors and a Scottish name, replied Latchy, imperturbable as ever. Aye, the McNeils did well when the chief married him. Do they still own the clan? No, Will owns it. When the McNeils were poor, a while back, they started to sell off the land. This part was bought by a man called Henderson, who hoped to turn it into his country estate. He built a house yonder and called it White Lodge, but his wife would not stay. No more than Madge Anderson would. She said she felt the clan didn't want her, that the spirit of the young bride was pushing her out. You mean she saw the ghost of the woman? Exclaimed Gina. Aye, that she puffed contentedly at his pipe. Did Madge say she had seen it too? It suited her to say she had, said Latchy dryly. But do not be worrying about it. You'll not see it because you have come with the swans, and the curse says that no woman will rest in Glen Gone until the swans come back in the springtime, when the true mistress of the master of the clan returns. Gina looked closely at his long-jawed face. He seemed quite serious, and his innocent blue eyes returned her gaze openly. You're not sure whether you believe me or not, are you, lass? Latchy quoted softly. No, I'm not. Who is master of the clan now? Will Fox. He bought it from the Henderson family. No wonder Will had looked at her sharply when she had said she had seen the swans that morning. No wonder he had been disturbed by their return. Latchy, do you know what the name of the McNeil's wife was? She asked. I imagine she was called Birdie, the Scottish version of the name Bridget, common enough in the Highlands and Islands. Look now, here's your wee cat. Wasn't I after telling you he would be coming to join you if you didn't hurry? It's a fine wee pussy you have there, and you'll have to be taking care of him and not letting him roam too far, and him not used to the land yet. Here we go. If he was at all disturbed by the return of the Swans to Glengorm, Will gave no sign of it on his return from Lockenville. He brought many letters, applications, he said, from people wishing to attend the camps in the summer. He expected her help in going through them and answering them. Not long after his return, and first group of campers arrived, having walked over the moors from Unipool as part of the adventure course. Most of them were boys between the ages of 14 and 16, excited by their first visit to the Highlands and grateful for the meal to which they helped themselves in the kitchen. Another group, including some girls, followed half an hour later. The youngsters were accompanied by two social workers. One was a burly bearded young man called Steve Harris, who was the outdoor projects officer of the youth association to which the youngsters belonged. And the other was a slim, fair young woman named Janet Fiennes. Janet confided to Gina that she was really a teacher of art and art in a school of Glasgow, but that she gave some of her free time to the youth association, which had been organized in the slum area in order to help youngsters disorientated by their removal from old condemned tenements to new housing estates. How do you help them? inquired Gina. By teaching them pottery amongst other skills, taking groups of 7 to 8 of them after school is over. The classes serve a dual purpose. Apart from learning a skill, they talk to me, and that's a contact with them. And I learn to know them and to understand something of what they're up against. The despondency of decay and demolition. The space is a marvelous contrast to the place where they live at present, and we're lucky that Captain Fox has made it available to them. I'm sorry though that Madge had to give up, and I hope her desertion won't set him against social workers as a whole, said Jeanette anxiously. He may not have very kindly feelings towards her personally, replied Gina, but I don't think he's the sort of person to allow her behavior to prevent him from doing something which he considers worthwhile. I hope you're right. Anyway, he has you to help him now. I must say that meal was very good. If you're going to feed us all like that during the next 2 weeks, I'm going to put on weight, laughed the lively, energetic Jeanette. During the next few days, Gina worked harder than at any time in her life. Up early every morning, obeying the summons of Will's hand on her bedroom door, she cooked 26 breakfasts, then cleared away and washed up. After that, she prepared the food for the evening meal and also for the packed lunches which the campers took with them on their various expeditions. Admittedly, she had help, but there were times when she thought, nostalgically, of various electrical gadgets her mother had possessed to assist in the preparation of meals. One evening, halfway through the camp, feeling particularly tired as she tidied up after finishing all the preparations for the next day, her mind wandered to the strange legend of the Swans, as told to her by Lecce Marie. It was probably only coincidence that the name of the wife of the McNeil who had once been master of the clan had been Birdie, the Highland version of Bridget. But it could be enough of a coincidence to raise Will's hopes about the possible return of his own wife, now that the Swans had come back. She hadn't had much private conversations with him since the campers had come. He usually spent the evenings with the social workers discussing the plans for the next day's activities. And by the time he returned to the house, Gina was in bed fast asleep. Not once had she been kept awake at night by thoughts of Oliver and what might have been if he had not been killed. Nor did she think of him much during the daytime. She was too busy. The youngsters attending the camp were a lively bunch, and all were grateful for the opportunity to enjoy the beautiful scenery and to participate in recreations which might otherwise have been denied to them. When it came to showing them how to sail, Will enlisted Gina's help, and she gave dryland instruction on the simplest points of sailing before showing them how to rig the dinghies and launch them. She enjoyed seeing the bright red sails of the small boats fluttering against the blues and greens of the loch on a fine day, and often wished she had time to go sailing herself. Yet when Will entered the kitchen behind her, she voiced her wish aloud to him. "There'll be plenty of time when they've gone," he said. Then, to her surprise, he brushed her cheek with the back of his hand, in that strangely affectionate gesture he had used once before. This time she didn't flinch away from him. "You're looking better," he remarked. "Behaving better, too. Not so your cat, though. Look at this." He held out his arm and pushed back his shirt sleeve to reveal a long, deep scratch on the inside of his wrist. "Oh, how did you how did you get that?" exclaimed Gina. "Ugh, rescuing your foolish animal." "When? Where? You didn't tell me." "Well, I'm telling you now, aren't I?" he retorted. He seems to be fascinated by high places. The more dangerous they are, the better. He had somehow scrambled down the cliffs at the end of the loch, and he was stuck on a ledge, letting out the most ear-splitting cries. I climbed down and managed to grab him. The scratch was my reward for my effort. "Thank you," said Gina faintly. She had a sudden vision of the cliffs, dark and forbidding, as she had often seen them, rearing up against the black cloth of the sunset. At the foot of them, the sea flung itself against tumbled rocks. If Blue had fallen, he would have been dashed to pieces against those rocks. If Will had slipped, he would have been he would have gone too, his body hurling over and over through the air into the heaving, smashing water. Her mouth trembled suddenly. Tears brimmed in her eyes. He had said she looked better, but she was still easily upset by the thought of death. "Are the tears for me or for the cat?" he asked derisively. She blinked fiercely and glared at him. "For both of you. You could have been killed." "Not I. I'm too experienced a climber to take any unnecessary risks. If I thought there was a chance of me slipping, I'd have come back for a rope. But you'll have to watch him. He's like this. He likes this place, and he's beginning to run wild. There's nothing to stop him from straying on to the McNeil's estate, and if Grant Parker, the game warden, sees him, oh, he might shoot first and ask questions afterwards." "Oh, surely he wouldn't shoot a kitten." "Oh, yes, he would. Those grouse moors are the McNeil pride and joy, and Parker raises some of the finest game in the country. He won't take kindly to a stray cat amongst his special pigeons. So, keep your precious Blue near you, if you can." "I'll try, but I've been so busy, and it isn't always possible to keep him in with the door forever opening." "I know. That's why I didn't want you to bring him. I don't think I haven't noticed how hard you've been working. You're not feeling so sorry for yourself now, are you?" "No, I'm not," she admitted. "I must have been a pain in the neck after Oliver was killed," she added, unconsciously using one of his own phrases to describe her miserable behavior. "You were," he agreed, "and your mother was at her wits' end, wondering what to do about you. Are you, uh, are you glad you came here to try Fox's remedy for all ills?" Now, that isn't a good question to ask at the moment. Ask me when my back isn't aching and my hands are restored to their normal state. She reposted. He laughed, and putting his arm around her shoulders, hugged her gently. Mrs. Chadwick was wrong. You have plenty of spark, and anyone who says otherwise will have me to reckon with, he said softly. Surprised by the hug and more than a little perturbed by the fact being close to him was having on her, she sought refuge in flippancy. Kitten soft, you called me, she accused. And so you are, he murmured. His hand slipped down over her shoulder and slid under her arm. She looked up to object. He bent his head swiftly and kissed her on the mouth. Gina sprang away from him, startled and quivering. How dare you? She exclaimed, unable to think of anything else to say, knowing she sounded ridiculously prudish. Hey, I dared because I wanted to kiss you to thank you for all you've done recently. You won't let me pay you because you volunteered to come? So, I have to find another way of expressing my appreciation. He explained, coolly. Now come off it, George. Stop behaving as if I'm the villain in some Victorian melodrama. What's a kiss between friends? He was laughing at her, and she could not bear his laughter anymore. Then she could bear his kiss, no matter how lightly it had been given. Turning, she fled up the stairs, every nerve tingling. Blue chased up after her, as usual, but for once she had forgotten him, and inadvertently she shut him out of the room in a desire to be alone with tumultuous thoughts. His scratching and mewling took her back to the door again. She opened it impatiently and let him in. Oh, it was all your fault, you silly kitten, she muttered. Ignoring her, Blue strolled across to the mat on which he slept every night, stretched out full length on his side, and blinked drowsily at her. If you hadn't been on that ledge, Gina continued, you wouldn't have had to rescue him. Then you wouldn't have scratched him, and he wouldn't have told me about the scratch, and I wouldn't have said what I did, and he wouldn't have been tempted to do what he did. It all made sense to Gina, but Blue didn't think much of the explanation and yawned disgustedly before licking his forepaw and passing it over one ear. Still quivering, Gina undressed and quickly climbed into the cold bed. The effect of Walt's kiss on her was alarming. Viewing it now from the shelter of her room, she knew that he had given it as he had said, in friendliness, as a way of showing his appreciation. A violent overreaction had been quite uncalled for. It would have been different, she agreed with herself, if they hadn't been alone in the house. It would have been different if she hadn't been all keyed up to marry Oliver, only to have her desires frustrated by his sudden death. It would have been different if Will hadn't married a girl called Bridget, who might turn up any day because the Swans were back in the clan, a sure sign that the true mistress of the master of the clan would return soon. Gina groaned, tired of the tug-of-war of argument, and fell asleep surprisingly quickly and slept as soundly as she had always slept in that bed. To her relief, Will made no reference to her odd behavior when she met him briefly before serving breakfast the next morning. And during the next few days, there were no more conversations alone with him before bedtime. Storms blew in from the Atlantic, and the water in the loch was churned up under the onslaught of wild wind and sleety rain. Two of the campers out on their 4-day camp returned sodden and miserable, their tent having been washed away by a rushing torrent of water which had suddenly developed on the mountainside, where they had been spending the night. Another lost his way on the moors, and a search party had to be organized to find him when he didn't turn up. He was found and brought back triumphantly by the boys whom Will had taken with him on the search, and who had all apparently enjoyed climbing perpendicular rock for the first time in their lives. Will took all the crisis in his stride, turning each adventure into an object lesson for the entire group. His calmness and foresight were remarkable, thought Gina. He was always able to think his way out of a difficult situation, but he never took unnecessary risks. He handled the young people easily and with humor, but when they had all gone, he admitted that he had missed Gavin, and that it was important that he found someone suitable to take Gavin's place before the next group arrived in May, because they would have no social workers with them, but would be private individuals paying for the chance to participate in some adventures. It was with that in mind that he left her and Lecce in charge of the farm and drove down to Glasgow to look up an old army acquaintance. Feeling rather pleased that he trusted her sufficiently to stay and look after his home, Gina took the opportunity to relax and explore the glen. The weather had changed again and was mild and sunny. There were many more signs of spring than had been visible when she had arrived. The icing was still on the summit of Banserg, but it had shrunk, and in the woodland which covered the lower slopes of the mountain, there was a glow of pink as buds swelled. Gina fed the swans every day. They were becoming more used to her, and no longer reached out their necks in ugly attack. They did not like Blue, however, and the frisky kitten was sensible enough to keep a safe distance from those snapping beaks and muscular necks. One day, when feeding time was over, Gina wandered along the edge of the loch, intending to go as far as the opposite shore which had always attracted her. As usual, Blue accompanied her, occasionally disappearing into the undergrowth of brambles and reappearing ahead of her. After one disappearance, he did not come back, having found that the distance to the opposite side of the loch was much further than she had anticipated. Gina wished to return to White Lodge. The absence of the kitten, however, made her unwilling to return without him, as she remembered was warning about the possibility of the kitten being shot by the game warden of the McNeil estate. Calling to Blue, she walked on a little further until she came to some wire fencing. It didn't look like electric fencing, so she ducked through the strands and went on, still calling to the cat. After a while, she decided it was silly to walk any further, so she sat down on a convenient boulder of rock and awaited Blue's appearance. Elachi would say there was really no need for her to hurry. She might as well relax and enjoy the view. From her position, she could see another aspect of the dark tower behind it. That dark tower, and behind it, winking through the screen of birches, the white walls of the house. The afternoon was still and quiet. No cry of seagull or warp disturbed the peace. Even the water was silent. "I suppose you realize you're trespassing?" The voice was masculine and rather husky. She turned to find a young man of her own age standing a few feet away from her. He was tall and too thin. His handsome face was a pale wedge framed by a tangle of longish black hair. His eyes were as dark as his hair, opaque and unwinking. He was dressed in well-cut tweed pants and a beautiful cream-colored Aran sweater. Between his hands was Blue. "Is this yours?" asked the young man, not waiting for her to answer his first question. "Yes. Where did you find him?" "Stalking a pair of robins who are busy building their nest. You best take care of him," If Parker sees him, you'll shoot him. He spoke gently, and his smile was diffident, yet disarming. Gina took Blue from him and thanked him. I wouldn't have trespassed if I hadn't lost him, she explained, apologetically. I couldn't care less whether you trespass or not, he replied. You from the White Lodge, aren't you? Yes. Gina pushed some tangles of hair back from her face, and the sunlight caught in the diamond on her finger, making it flash. I'll go back now that I have him, she added. Do you mind if I walk with you? I have nothing else to do. Mother sent me out to get some air, but there's nothing more dull than walking by myself. Before the storm started, I used to come down to the beach here and watch you through the binoculars. Oh, she was dismayed. He groaned rather sheepishly. Do you mind? Yes, I do. Why didn't you come over and make yourself known to us instead of spying? I wasn't really spying. It was just something to do. I suppose I should have come over. Andrea keeps saying I should meet Will Fox and other things an adventure course would be good for me. Make a man of me, she says. He laughed, rather mirthlessly. But I am a man already, and I don't want to be done good too. I have been ill. She could see that he had. His face had the pallor of someone who had recently spent a long time in hospital. What was wrong? She asked gently, feeling a surge of sympathy towards him. Ah, car accident, he said gruffly, as if it hurt him to talk about it. Multiple fractures, then pneumonia. Oh, don't be too sympathetic. It was my own fault. I was driving too fast on a wet, greasy road and the car skidded. I always drive too fast, he added in a low, defiant voice. He was really desperately unhappy, thought Gina, in need of help in the same way she had been after Oliver had been killed. Was there anyone else in the car at the time of the crash? asked she asked, thinking it might help him to talk to a complete stranger about it. Yes, that's why I didn't want to go on living afterwards, he mumbled, exactly as she had felt. Then Will had appeared on the scene and had forced her back into life. Hey, go, she persisted. Hey, go, she persisted. Yeah. He closed his eyes tightly as if to prevent her from seeing tears brim in them. My girlfriend. We had just decided to split, or at least she decided. She knew my mother didn't approve of her. Now she's in intensive care and may not live. Who is mother? Asked Gina, deciding to ignore the break in his voice. Oh, I thought you'd know, he exclaimed. I've only been at White Lodge for just over 2 weeks, and I've been so busy that I haven't had time to find out about neighbors. He was staring at her curiously. Hmm, then you must have come with the Swans, he said. Yes, I did. How odd. But it fits in with the legend, doesn't it? He exclaimed. Gina was startled. She couldn't see how her coming to the glen fitted the legend at all. Does it? I don't see how. Oh, never mind. Forget it. I'm Gregor McNeil. He said as they moved side by side back along the shore. My mother is the chief of the clan, and you've been trespassing on her estate. Will it be yours one day? He shook his head with a glimmer of a smile. No, no. My eldest brother is the heir. I'm just the no good younger son, he replied. It'll be his when she dies, and that won't be for years and years. Like Victoria Regina. She'll outlive everyone. She's a tough nut, and the only person I've heard of who doesn't seem to be afraid of her is Will Fox. As a result, she has it in for him. Why? Because he goes his own way without consulting her. But mostly, I suppose because he owns the clan and she would like to see it as part of the McNeil estate again. She was furious when she learned that the Hendersons had sold it behind her back. She tried to buy it back off Will, but he wouldn't sell. Then he started the adventure camps. She'd love to find out some black mark against him so that she could hold it over him and make him dance to the tunes. But she can't. His army career was without blemish. His dealings with the local authorities are above board. And as far as anyone can tell, his morals are of good repute. So she's been trying something else. What is that? My young sister Andrea has taken a liking to him, so mother, mother is encouraging her. She thinks that as a son-in-law, Will Fox might be more amenable to her ideals. Oh, but began Gina and then stopped short. She had been about to say that Will was already married. Then she had realized that that piece of information was not hers to pass on, and that Will would be annoyed if he learned that she had been talking about his personal life, especially since he did not do that himself. It was quite obvious that the McNeil family knew no more about Bridget than Latchy did. But of course, when Mother sees you, she'll realize that he scotched that move on her part too. Sees me? Gina was absolutely mystified. Yes, said Gregor with a grin which seemed to gloat over the possibility of his mother being this confident. She's not going to like you one little bit. I'm going to leave you here because it's quite a long walk back to the castle, and I'm not up to walking a long away yet. Thanks for letting me talk to you. There was light in his dark eyes now, a gleam of admiration as they roved over her smoothly coiled red Clementine brown hair and creamy-skinned, heart-shaped face. Please come and see us at the lodge whenever you feel like a change. There won't be any more campers for another month, said Gina impulsively. Yeah, I'd like to come, he said simply. But perhaps I should warn you. Now I've found someone like you in this wilderness where nothing ever happens, I am likely to make a nuisance of myself. You haven't told me your name. It's Gina. Gina, the nut brown maiden who came with the swans. He murmured, and his smile appeared, oh so diffident this time, but infinitely charming. Yes, he added, the glen is going to be quite different now that you're here. The meeting with Greg and McNeil made Gina feel light-hearted. It was nice to know that there was someone about her own age living near with whom she had something in common, even if it was only a fatal car accident. She thought about him several times during the next 2 days while she was busy about the house. He was handsome and cultured, yet had a touch of wilderness which was attractive. She was looking forward to seeing him again when he came on his promised visit to the lodge. Sunlight and soft winds made cleaning a must. Gina, se- Gina swept away winter cobwebs and washed everything that was washable. She had never had this urge to make everything clean before. But then, she had never had a house to herself before, and if she didn't spring clean White Lodge, who would? In a frenzy of energy, she washed blankets and curtains and strung them on the line in the garden to blow in the gentle breezes. Later, she beat the dust out of the rugs and mats. In the house, she washed paintwork and floors. Astonished by her burst of activity, Lachi, who was taking his time to plow Wall's fields ready for sowing grain, shook his head at her and told her that if she wasn't careful, she'd be getting indigestion. She laughed at him and told him she didn't care. The house was going to be clean and sparkling before Will returned. Ah, he won't notice, muttered Lecce, in pessimistic mood. Think not? Challenged Gina. Want to bet? He looked surprised. Ah, no. And me? Not a betting man, he moaned, shifting his pipe from one side of his mouth to the other. I'll tell you what, we'll do then, said Gina. You know that lovely old pewter jug you have sitting on the mantelpiece in your cottage? I do that? It was my grandmother's and her mother's before. Family heirloom. That's what it is. Then will you lend it to me? Now, why should I be doing that? I want to arrange some flowers in it. And where will you be after getting the flowers? Are you going to show me where the primroses grow? Replied Gina. Primroses? That's easy. Not today. Tomorrow morning. I'm going to arrange them in the jug, and I'm going to put it on the kitchen table. If Wall notices them in the clean house, if it if it doesn't, you can have it back. Do you agree? Archie's eyes twinkled as he looked down at her. Ah, it's a winning way you have with you, lass, for all your Sassenach. I agree. By evening that day, Gina was tired with her efforts at house cleaning. But there was one last job to do, and that was to tidy the big roll-topped desk in the living room, where Will kept all the correspondence pertaining to the camps. She had been wanting to tidy it ever since she had started to help him to answer the applications. It took quite a long time because she discovered to her dismay that Will's private correspondence was mixed up with the business stuff. There were letters from his mother, letters from Maxwell, postcards from friends on holiday in various parts of the world. Gina decided that she must suggest to Will that if he was going to continue with the adventure camps, he should obtain a proper filing system. Then she brought her thoughts to a full stop. Stop it, Gina, she said. You're only a volunteer. Don't get too involved because one day you'll be leaving. She threw away the clutter of unwanted paper and then began to sort the remainder into neat piles. While doing so, she came across the invitation to her own wedding. The sight of it brought tears to her eyes and held up the job of tidying for a few minutes. When she began again, she came across several letters written on pink, perfumed paper. The postmark on the envelope was German. Her curiosity getting the better of her, thinking they might be letters once written to Will by Bridget, Gina took the sheet of paper out of one of the envelopes. To her surprise, the letter was written in a language she recognized as being German. It was signed with the name Irma. She was glad she didn't understand the language because she was sure she would have been tempted to read the letter if it had been written in English. As it was, she felt slightly embarrassed, as if she had stumbled upon a secret in Walt's life, and she pushed the pink envelopes away in a pigeonhole and spent the rest of her hours awake, wondering who Irma was and why she would or should write so many letters to Walt. Someone is vacuuming. Someone is vacuuming. Vacuuming. But I think I'm gonna end it here. Yeah. My throat is itchy. My throat is dry. I need to drink water before I cry. Okay. 3 hours and 28 minutes.